So once again, welcome on in. Sit back, relax, and enjoy your third part of reading of the Left-Right game. As we will be picking up with part 7. Part 7. Hi guys. Apologies for the delay in getting this post up. Events conspired against me, it seems. Please let me know if you have any information. The Left-Right game. Draft 1. The 13th of February, 2017. I'm followed back from the junction by an overture of birdsong. I'm grateful for the company. In the wake of Clyde's departure, I'm welcoming of any sound that distracts me from my own solitary footsteps, grasping for any conceivable antidote to the palpable silence he's left behind. I am not, however, as welcoming of what the shrill, melodic warbling represents, the first symptom of impending daybreak. I'd only been up at this hour a few times before stumbling back from Nidri Street and down Sweet Market after an unexpectedly heavy night out. My housemates Molly, Craig, and Tom would spend the walk joyously discussing the evening scandals. Meanwhile, leaning against one another as we all stumbled away from a night of horrific excess. This time around, the circumstances couldn't be more different. I'm quite alone as I make my way up the road, and the only excess in my night has been a relentless torrent of stress and melancholy. There is one similarity, however, resting in the back of my mind as much now as it did then, the nagging feeling that the day ahead will be one of bitter and immediate consequences. As somber as this night has been, I still find myself clinging to it, reluctant to witness the harrowing developments that sunrise will bring. In a few hours' time, the convoy will wake up to find they have suffered yet another loss. It won't be the brutal, heart-wrenching feeling that they experienced with Eve, or Apollo, or Bonnie, who perished in front of our eyes, but a muted sensation of gross unfairness. Less immediate, yet all the more insidious. As much as we hate to face the horrors in our lives, it can be far worse when they strike us without our knowing. To find out only the next morning that you have been affected by cruel forces acting in complete disregard of your presence and taking without concern for you. It's not going to be a pleasant morning. Regardless, I'm glad to see the convoy when it finally comes into view. The hulking Wrangler rests by the roadside like an old relic. Right now, I can think of nothing more comforting than climbing into its secure, rugged shell. For a moment, I find it strange how an object built for transit has become the one fixed point in my world. Then again, it's not exactly the strangest thing that's happened on this road. Blue Jay's car is parked sideways laid out across the tarmac. The windows are shrouded in darkness, yet for the briefest moment, I think I see the red dot of a smoldering cigarette, igniting behind the glass, glowing momentarily before dropping out of sight. I fix my eyes on the Wrangler and keep walking, resolved to ignore the ominous flicker of embers, and attempting to ignore its uncomfortable implications. Even still, I shudder to think of the grim conclusions that are being drawn within that acrid, smoke-filled echo chamber. I rest my hand on the Jeep's passenger side door, pausing briefly to gauge the sun's progress. I probably have less than 2 hours before I'll be expected to step over that nascent horizon, to let Rob carry me into unknown territory, onto the unexplored section of the Left-Right game. Whatever lies at the end of this ordeal could very well be two roads over. Then again, it could take a whole lot longer. I suppose there's only one way to find out. I climb quietly into the car and gently position myself next to Lilith. It's cramped, and now she's had the space to move around, it takes a modicum of contortion to properly lie down. But it still feels more comfortable than the prospect of resting on the open space that had been reserved for Clyde. For tonight, at least, it would feel a little too much like resting on a fresh grave. The morning does come quicker than I'd like. Surprisingly, once I awake from a blissfully dreamless sleep, I realize I'm not tired at all. Perhaps it's going to hit me later in the day, or perhaps the need for sleep is yet another casualty of the road's odd sustaining quality. It's unsettling to think of the road as exerting some metamorphic influence over me, however convenient the effect. After losing most of my need to eat and drink, and now starting to require less rest, I can't help but feel that some wants us to continue on the road, removing everything else that might distract us from the journey. It's a notion that intrigues and terrifies me in almost equal measure. When I open my eyes, I find myself staring directly at Lilith, who has turned to face me in the night. I can tell she's already awake, quietly resting her eyes, understandably reluctant to face the morning without someone at her side. Hey. Good morning. Hey, good morning. How do you sleep? Yeah, not too bad. This place isn't so comfortable. Yeah, you get used to it. A moment of silence passes between us. I'm already aware of the empty spaces on the other side of the Jeep, hidden just beyond a pile of luggage and jerry cans. Be easy for me to act surprised at Clyde's absence, to say that I had slept through the night, to throw myself into a fruitless search effort and to realize the truth alongside everyone else. Part of me wants to avoid the weight of recent events, to step aside and let all blame fall against the road. Yet even if I wanted to, I knew it wouldn't be right. I'm not going to contribute a new set of secrets to this journey. Anyway, for all I know, Blue Jay saw me return from the junction. I wouldn't want to give her the satisfaction of catching me in a lie. When you tell them what's happened, then the conversation will need to happen immediately, certainly before they have a chance to discover Clyde's absence themselves. The words don't come out easily. They're impossible to form into a delicate order, and I quickly realize that any attempt is just delaying the inevitable. In the end, all I can bring myself to say is, Clyde's gone, Lilith. Takes a few seconds of quiet comprehension before Lilith sits bolt upright, alarmingly peering over the luggage to Clyde's side of the Jeep. Rob! Rob! Lilith. What's going on? What's going on? Something took Clyde. Rob is suddenly wide awake as he twists around to view the back section of the Wrangler. See the realization dawn on his face as he understands what's happened. Turns back around and fumbles with the ignition. His eyes in the rearview mirror are burning with desperate intention. He still thinks he can catch up with Clyde before he crosses the threshold. Nothing's taken him, Lilith. Hold on. Rob. He's gone. We don't know that. We just gotta... Rob, he's gone. He already passed the junction. His eyes flick to the rear mirror, meeting mine, and stays running as he turns around to face me. How do you know that? The urgency has drained from the car, as said by a palpable air of inquiry. Ruth and Rob are both looking at me intently, and for the first time on the road, I feel like a figure of legitimate suspicion. I was with him when he crossed over. What the fuck? What was this? It's night around 4 a.m. He said that he... It's my words. Rob swings the driver's side door open and leaves the Wrangler. I watch him march into the center of the road, his entire body tense and strained by a swoop of anger. I quickly climb out behind him. Damn it. Damn it, Bristol. Why in hell did you let him? You weren't there, Rob. We were fucking yards away, Bristol. You didn't think to wake us up? Of course I did. He told me not to. Okay, well that's just fine, isn't it? He had made his decision, Lilith. None of us were going to stop him. I certainly would have just fucking kill himself. You tied Bonnie to the fucking heiress, but you let Clyde waltz over the road without even telling us? That's a false equivalency. A false... Are you serious? Yes, of course it is. Bonnie wasn't herself. Clyde was capable of making an informed decision. His sister had just died. Of course he wanted to join her. So, mean you let him You let him die. You might as well have helped him blow his brains out. Lilith. Rob speaks the name harshly, forcing its owner into an immediate silence. After letting the group breathe for a moment, he speaks calmly. Bristol, are you sure there wasn't nothing we could do? I looked Rob in the eye. His words hit me harder than Lilith's impassioned tirade. Sitting before the both of them, at the intersection of their expected series, I feel the first inkling of doubt creep into my mind. What would have happened if we talked Clyde back into the Wrangler? If Rob had forced him to stay? Could he have found some reason to move forwards if kept him for a night, a day, a week? All I can do is hold on to my recollection of the night before, reminding myself of the sense of calm finality that radiated from Clyde when I confront him. All I can do is trust that I made the right call. No, there wasn't. Okay, well, then there's nothing more to say. Rob walks to the back of the Wrangler, cutting the conversation short through the quietest resumptions of his usual morning routine. Storms back to the car and shuts herself inside. I'm left standing in the center of the road, wondering if I could feel any more wretched. I know what you did. Well, at least that answers my question. Seems that while I had been struggling to defend the validity of my actions to Rob and Lilith, Blue Jay had very quietly climbed out of her car, waiting patiently for the rest of the convoy to scatter before or directing a vicious smile towards me. Can we not do this, Blue Jay? She responds to my words by ignoring them completely. I was up in the night watching you all. Surprised when I saw you leave with Clyde and come back alone, calm as a grave. I don't know if Clyde was your little game. I don't know if Clyde was in on your little game, but he sure as fuck wasn't happy with how far you've taken it. He had to go, didn't he? I don't want to dignify her words with a response. In point of fact, I'm not entirely sure what I'd say to such an absurd accusation. Our statement rings with all the trademarks of paranoid conspiracy, the unnatural confidence, the vague language, the frenetic conclusions which are so obvious to her, it's even impossible for me to grasp. In the end, Blue Jay doesn't wait for my response. I just want you to know, I'm not falling for your game. You will not turn me around, and if you try anything like that with me, I will kill you. I stare at the woman before me, her pupils two dark pools of venom, her smile curled into a crooked smile of unadulterated contempt. Why didn't you talk to the hitchhiker, Blue Jay? Jay's brow furrows, a smirk degrading from her face. I didn't wait for a response. I mean, now that we've seen what happens to people who spoke to him, it's fair to assume you didn't. Or am I wrong? Blue Jay presses her lips firmly together, glaring at me, the veins at her temples embossed against her taut skin. It's all right, Blue Jay. I was scared, too. I walk to the back of the Wrangler where Rob has pulled out the stove and 4 camping chairs after helping him set them up in the middle of the road, allowing him to cook me a bowl of steaming hot rice. I sit down next to him and eat what I can. We can't think of anything to talk about. The 2 remaining chairs stay empty for the rest of the meal. When I climb back into the Wrangler, Lilith seems quiet. She's less angry now, and I've seen before with her. Is now being forced to confront the feelings her fury had been overshadowing. She shares a look with me in the rear view mirror. A look a bit being genuinely lost. I find myself reflecting the same expression as I stare back at her. And in that small sliver of glass, I think we both find a glimmer of understanding. An understanding that there have been no easy choices on this road, and that we should forgive each other and ourselves for the decisions we've had to make. After all, I wouldn't be surprised if there are harder choices ahead. It takes us less than an hour before we reach the woods. The drive has been predictably bereft of conversation. However, as the cornfields merge into deep green woodland, and a thin opening we're supposed to draws nearer, Rob breaks the silence with the customary all cars address. Fairman to all cars. Just want to say it's an honor to in this next corner with y'all. From here on out, we move slow, reporting anything unusual and stay on the lookout for the next turn, okay? Alright, here we go. Rob twists the steering wheel, We turn in a slow, deliberate arc towards the gap in the forest. The tarmac disappears below us, giving way to a rough dirt track. A towering legion of knotted trees eclipse the convoy, the sun all but disappearing behind their thick canopy. The significance of this small turn in the road isn't lost on me. We had finally crossed the threshold into the unknown reaches of the left-right game. For all we knew, we were the first people to ever come this far, the first explorers of an entirely uncharted world. I'm not surprised when I realized I've been holding my breath. I examined my compatriots closely. Lilith isn't even looking out the window, lost in her own tumultuous thoughts. Rob is reacting exactly as I expected, looking out of every window with an air of mystified wonder. Well, I'll be. It's beautiful, ain't it? As I look away from him and back out the windshield, I find myself smiling, even after the stressful morning we've all had, and the uncertain day that lies ahead. Rob's statement rings with a joyous sincerity which I can't help but appreciate. I also can't help but agree with him. In its own eerie way, it's a beautiful place. The Wrangler moves at a crawl for the rest of the day. The woods are vast and untamable. Thin, swooping branches hang lazily over the road, clattering against the light rigs as we pass beneath them. Many of the trees stand at strange, crooked angles, their various disparate inclines making it impossible to see too far in either direction. Rob spends every moment scanning the sides of the road. The trees that flank us are so thick, so tightly packed together, that it's easy to denote an upcoming turn. I suspect Rob simply didn't want to take any chances, paranoid as he is about the road's deceptive qualities. He needn't have worried. There are only 4 turns across the entire afternoon. Each one is identified far in advance and navigated perfectly. Before I know it, we've entered the early evening with no discernible end to the woods in sight. We've been traveling uphill for a short while, plateauing onto a thin stretch of road, an endless expanse of forest to our left, and a dangerously steep bank to our right. With one less side of the road to look out for, Rob seems a little more comfortable holding a conversation. So what are you going to do if you get to the end of the road? Document it, bring it home, hand it over to the world. And after that? I guess I might take a vacation. I should visit London. You want to show me around? You've never been to London? I just pass by carrying packages. Never liked cities so much. Try to stay out of them when I can. I'd go if I had a tour guide, though. Okay, that's my next story, then. Rob Guthard takes on London. I don't think folk would want to listen to that. I don't know, I think people would tune in. Or are you just worried you'll grow to like the place? Junior would never let me hear the end of that. Fair enough. Wait, sorry. My son wouldn't let me forget. He's always been a city boy. I stare out into the pitch-black forest, suddenly thinking back to my arrival in Phoenix, Arizona just 5 days before. I recollect my formative meeting with Rob Guthard, and how I'd been treated to the briefest overview of his life. I didn't push for too much detail, wanting to hear the story in his own words and under the assumption that I could get more background after a short stint on the road. After 4 days of intrigue and horror and stress, I hadn't had time for a follow-up. In all honesty, it's only now I think back on it, I realize just how little ground we covered in our first interview. How eager he was to skip past the formative details of his existence. I don't know the names of his ex-wives or anyone who isn't directly involved in his work with the paranormal. For example, I didn't know he referred to his son as Junior. Often used a general nickname for a child. It can every so often mean something much more specific. Does your son share your name? Turns to me, confused. Yeah, did I never... Look out! Rob snaps forward as a fleeting blur darts across the road. Tumbling down the steep verge to our right, Over the engine, we hear rustles and thuds as it disappears down the steep hill, side and onto the deep forest below. What was that? Was that a deer? That's what it looked like. It went straight off the edge. Why would it do that? Ain't too bright is all. Guys, can we get moving? That is... Entered by the sound of faint rumbling, emanating from the woods on the left side of the road. What is that? Waiting around to find out. Rob kicks the car into gear and pulls down the track. Less than 5 seconds later, he slams the brake once more, stalling the car as a small group of 3 or 4 deer burst out in front of us. A few more can be heard skittering behind the Wrangler, slamming against the back of the Jeep as they hurriedly negotiate the gap between us and Blue Jay. As Rob works to restart the car, I stare out the window to the forest, finally aware of what I'm hearing in the trees. The thunderous sound of hooves against the earth, brushing past the undergrowth, struggling over rocks and branches on their way towards us. In no time at all, the forest erupts from empty darkness into chaotic, violent life, as an unbroken horde of frenzied deer burst out from the trees. Rob tries to tell us to hold on, but he doesn't have time. The path ahead floods with hundreds of stampeding deer, an unbroken torrent that blocks out the headlight's beam. Lilith jumps back from the passenger door as deep, thudding knells vibrate through the Wrangler. The deer, locked in a desperate sprint with little space to maneuver, are running head first into the side of the car. One of the smaller deer bolts out from the forest, hits the deep green metal just below my window. The reverberation shaking the glass, I think I hear its neck snap. The one that gets past the car aren't faring better. Locked in a frantic state and forced along by their equally desperate cohorts. I can only watch as they spill over the edge of the steep hillside. Countless bodies crash into the darkness, carried down into what I can only assume is a quickly developing mass grave of twisted, interlocking bodies. Rob, get us out of here. We ain't moving through this. Just stay down. What the fuck? Somebody help! Blue Jay sounds terrified. The Wrangler is taking a beating from the onslaught of desperate creatures, but is still managing to hold firm. When I look back toward Blue Jay, I see a different story entirely. The car is lying at an angle, pushing towards the edge of the hill by the sheer force of the herd's collective impact. The passenger side is on display, riddled with slick red marks and heavy, craterous dents. The creatures rush past her, clumsily clambering over the hood and hammering into the doors of the car. Vijay screams into the receiver, placing a hand over her eyes as front tires passes over the edge. The car's chassis strips down into the dirt. Looking for her, when I turn back to the forest, I can see it's empty dramatically. The flood has subsided. The last few deer are pelting through the trees and across the road, their position at the back of the herd providing them with more than enough space to maneuver around the convoy. For Amanda Blue Jay, get yourself over here. We gotta go now. What was that? It was just a herd of deer. Blue Jay, but they were running pretty hard, and I ain't looking to meet what they were running from. We don't have time to get you back on the road. Get over here now. Nothing more can be heard from Blue Jay's radio except for static and a few intermittent gasps of breathless fear. Damn it. Stay in the car. Lilith, hand me the rifle. I ain't taking any chances out here. Lilith finds the rifle and hands it over to Rob, grabbing some supplementary info from the glove compartment. Rob climbs out and slams the door, marching through the dirt to Blue Jay's ruined car. I clamber into the back of the Wrangler, struggling over a pile of empty jerry cans and surveying the scene as it unfolds. In an almost Herculean effort, Rob wrenches the passenger side door open and holds his hand for Blue Jay to take. I look on as she unbuckles her seatbelt, climbs out unassisted, and immediately launches herself at Rob, crying her eyes out and lashing at his chest with 2 clenched fists. She looks distraught, terrified, and violently angry. Stands there and takes it, whispering vague assurances to her as she unloads her terror and frustration to every wailing blow. Come on, Blue Jay, we gotta go. Talks under her breath, willing Blue Jay's catharsis to spirit itself along. I look at her, silently sharing her impatience. Then, something catches my eye, something in the distance behind Lilith, slowly making its way through the trees. I turn around and scramble to the front of the car, returning with the transceiver. Rob, get back, there's something in the forest. In my warning crackle out from his car, Rob turns in my direction before alarmingly staring into the forest, where a pale figure is winding its way towards the pair. What I can ascertain, as it briefly leaves the obscuring undergrowth, it seems to be small, tremendously thin, and crawling unevenly on its hands and feet. The creature stops in a clearing ahead of Rob and Blue Jay, in view of me and Lilith. Shrouded from everyone in the shadow of the forest, Blue Jay separates from Rob, pulling a torch out of her bag. Slowly, with trembling fingers, she points the beam towards the creature and switches it on. The resulting sight is incomprehensible. The beam instantly illuminates the light frame of a thin, almost emaciated child. It's barely over a year old, deathly pale, covered in dirt. Its skin stretched taut over her frail limbs. It stares up at Blue Jay, reflexively holding one arm over its eyes to shield itself from the bright LED light. But God, what's happening to it? I know exactly what Lilith's talking about. My hand raises to my mouth as I watch the child struggle through the stream of harsh white light. With every step it takes, the child's form starts to shift and change. Its limbs elongate in jagged, lurching bursts of growth. Anything exposed to the beam develops with grotesque rapidity. It's as if the child is aging before our eyes. Letting out a tortured cry, the creature darts toward Blue Jay, angrily swatting the torch from her grip. Blue Jay screams in shock and pain as she holds her stricken hand, her attention transfixed on the child who has seemingly aged almost 3 years in a matter of seconds. Even in the fresh darkness, with her head torch fractured on the ground, I can tell Blue Jay is paralyzed with an abject, consuming horror. Rob doesn't hesitate. He reflexively grabs Blue Jay and pulls her backward into the path of her headlights. The creature reaches for them as they go, one hand passing after them into the light. It pulls back quickly, its eyes full of heart-wrenching juvenile tears. The fingers of its left hand age on the rest of its body. Its cries begin anew. As ghastly as it seems, the child doesn't seem malevolent or demonic. In fact, as it looks back towards Blue Jay, it seems genuinely upset, unable to comprehend the actions of those around him. As it stares sorrowfully back at its newly malformed fingers, it's not much of a stretch to assume the transformations are as painful to endure as they are disturbing. Stay in the lap, Blue Jay. Keep moving. Blue Jay breaks away from Rob, sprints towards the Wrangler. As soon as she begins to flee, the child lets out a high-pitched scream and strikes the hood of Blue Jay's car. The impact of the blow is impossibly forceful. In less than an instant, the chassis crumbles into a mass of jagged metal. One remaining headlight disappears from view as the car is launched off the path and rolls into the valley below. With Rob and Blue Jay now returned to darkness, the child scares quickly towards Blue Jay, grabbing her foot as it lifts off the ground and yanking it backwards. With all her momentum immediately halted, and one foot taken out from beneath her, Blue Jay has nowhere to go but down. She slams into the earth, her chin bouncing off a sharp rock. Blue Jay looks at us with stunned, pleading eyes. Lilith and I have only a few seconds to meet her gaze before she is dragged backwards along the ground. She screams in pain, her ankle caught in the child's iron grip. It doesn't even break pace as it walks back towards the woods, pulling Blue Jay along like a rag doll. Rob reaches out for her, snatching Blue Jay's hand as she writhes and thrashes against an unstoppable force. They connect briefly, but Rob's effort to keep a hold of her is futile, dashed immediately as she is pulled effortlessly from his hands. Blue Jay resorts to clawing at the ground, dragging thick, dark soil and pulling loose rocks free from the dirt. Rob somberly unstraps his rifle, swinging it to his front. He reaches into the breast pocket of his jacket and chambers a single bullet. Blue Jay looks on as Rob raises the rifle to his shoulder and aims for the back of the oblivious child's head. Oh, God. He turns away from the window, cowering away from the insanity outside the car. I can barely watch myself as as Rob places his finger on the trigger. The shot never comes. Blue Jay shrieks as the child reaches the tree line, pulling her into the undergrowth. His hands are shaking, unable to do what needs to be done. Cursing loudly at the air itself, Rob lets the rifle fall to the ground. He stands immobile as Blue Jay's screams continue to emanate through the trees. His expression has been worn by everyone on the road. Like all of them, he's no longer present, lost to a realm of hopelessness and bewilderment. But unlike many others, he doesn't stay that way for long. Unlike the rest of us, Rob Guthard manages to bring himself back. Bristol, there's a torch in the green bag. Get it now. I don't have time to hesitate. I scour the contents of the Wrangler desperately. Blue Jay's screams growing increasingly distant with every second. Locating a large green bag in the far corner, I crawl across the Wrangler, unfasten the straps, and spill its contents into the car. A heavy-duty LED torch clangs against the cabin floor, and I snatch it up before it can roll away. Returning to Rob, I swing the back doors open and jump out onto the dirt track. Throw the torch towards Rob's outstretched hand. As soon as he catches it, Rob sprints out into the forest, leaving me and Lilith behind. The events that unfold among the trees are told to us in sound and light. After almost a minute of silence, the torch's rays burst through the trees. Blue Jay's distant screeching intensifies as the child breaks into a gut-wrenching cry. A large crash echoes through the night air, the sound of bark creaking as the very trees shatter into splinters. The light dances chaotically as Rob lets out a cathartic, damaged roar. Suddenly, the child's desolate wailing grows more distant, retreating deep, deep into the woods, then suddenly silence. Bristol, what's happening? I don't know. Stay in the car. We wait for what seems like an age lost in worry before the gentle rustling of undergrowth calls our attention back to the tree line. A moment later, Rob emerges from the trees, holding Blue Jay's arm around his shoulder. Oh, thank God, thank God. The pair stumble over us, slowly and painfully. Blue Jay walks with a limp. Her ankle is already horribly bruised. Rob sports a series of cuts across his face, but seems otherwise unharmed. He calls back to us, utterly exhausted. Nothing to it. An irrepressible smile grows across my face, a pained grimace of sincere joy. I raise a hand to my mouth as tears of unbridled relief start to roll down my cheeks. It's a brief, fleeting moment in an otherwise dark night, but for once we've managed to pass through the storm, battered and broken, but at the very least still together. Just a second. Blue Jay falls to the ground, slipping free of Rob's grip and unable to hold her own weight. Rob turns back to look where she's fallen and finds her crawling slowly towards the steep verge. Blue Jay. Denise, you okay? Blue Jay stops crawling, places her hands to the ground, and rises unsteadily. I suppose she can stand on her own after all when she's finally upright. When she's finally upright, she turns back towards Rob, raising his rifle to her shoulder and fixing it on his torso. My smile vanishes. Denise, what are you... Put it down. It was a child. Rob, it was a child. What did you... God, Bristol, what's happening? Stay in the car, Lilith. Denise, you've seen it just as much as me. You saw what it did. It tore at my... It broke the skin. Why are you doing this? Denise, you know what you saw, okay? You know all this is real. I ain't doing this to you, it's happening. To all of us, it's... Rob stares at the Blue Jay, then down to the rifle, the sights boring into his chest. Okay. How about we turn the car around? Now, I'll turn this around and I'll take you back home and I'll drop you off outside the tunnel, safe and sound. I just want to get you home safe. What do you say? Blue Jay looks into Rob's eyes. The rifle quivers in our hands. We all wait, scarcely taking a breath for Blue Jay's response. I don't believe you. The shot echoes around us. Rob falls to his knees, a look of surprise and disbelief carved into his face. A plume of dark red blossoms around his shoulder. There's no air in my lungs. My entire body is paralyzed by the shock, by the rank unfairness, the sheer impossibility of the scene before me. I still don't understand how it could possibly be happening. My God, no. Blue Jay quickly paces up to Rob, snatches a handful of ammunition from his breast pocket, and reloads the rifle with practiced efficiency. She stops shaking. In fact, there's a calm conviction to her movements which convinces me with shocking immediacy that I might be about to die. I dive back into the Wrangler, slamming the door shut behind me. I find Lilith gripped by an immediate, immobilizing shell shock. We need to go, Lilith. We need to go, okay? Gently open the driver's door. Climbing out and edging along the verge, keeping low to avoid Blue Jay's line of sight. Lilith climbs out after me, closing the door softly behind us, making it sound, conscious of every wrestling leaf that passes underfoot. I gesture for us to make our way around the Wrangler's hood. Lilith goes first, staying below the windows, working her way to the front of the car, and passing around the corner from the hood of the Wrangler will be able to make a beeline to the trees. Don't play fucking games with me. Before I can make my way around to join Lilith, Blue Jay's impatience bowls over. You can hear her footsteps in the rough ground as she makes her way over to the Wrangler. The situation rapidly spiraling further from my control. There's only one thing I can do to stop her discovering the both of us. We're coming out. I raise my hands and stand up, making my way to the back of the Wrangler. Blue Jay stops walking before she gets far enough to notice Lilith. She turns to face me, raising her rifle to her shoulder. A moment later, I hear Lilith bursting out from our hiding space, sprinting into the trees. Blue Jay quickly realizes what's happened, and with a yell of violent frustration, turns the rifle to face the tree line. Lilith has already disappeared into the dark forest, out of range and out of sight. I choose not to attempt to rush Blue Jay in the midst of this distraction, and I'm right not to. Realizing Lilith is lost to her, Blue Jay quickly spins towards me and levels the rifle at my chest. I knew you were all in this, you monsters. Her eyes are practically bulging from their sockets, her entire face contorted in malicious, sickening, righteous hatred. For all these days on the road, I've never seen something quite like this. You're not well, Blue Jay. No, I'm not willing to fall for your tricks. How could this all be a trick, Blue Jay? How? Apollo, Eve, Bonnie, you saw what happened to them. It's beyond our understanding, mine and yours. There's no such thing as magic, only fools and frauds. There it was, in one sentence, the trigger for Blue Jay's creeping insanity, the inflexible leaf that had broken her mind against a maelstrom of contradiction. With every impossible event she had witnessed, every brutal death that had folded in front of her, Blue Jay's unwearying skepticism had barred her from blaming the supernatural, from blaming the road. Instead, she had blamed us, a swiftly dwindling pool of conspirators, whose crimes had swiftly spiraled from deception to reckless endangerment to outright murder. As far as Blue Jay was concerned, We were the only monsters on this road. This wasn't madness, it was self-defense. It doesn't matter anymore. You can go home, okay? But just at least take Lilith with you. Please, she isn't part of this. I'm not an idiot, Alice. Don't you think I've been watching? You're all complicit. As far as I'm concerned, you can all walk. Sorry, I just don't think I can... You do this. She laughs a sarcastic, ugly chuckle, holding the rifle tight against her shoulder. I can't see how that's your decision. Well, that's always been your issue, hasn't it, Denise? You lack imagination. I step backwards, letting gravity carry me over the threshold of the steep, dark slope. In the last few seconds, before I topple into the darkness, I clench the fingers of my left hand. When I'd been holding both my hands up, my empty palms face vertically towards her. Blue Jay could have easily mistaken the band around my finger for jewelry. As I fall backwards, Blue Jay's eyes fix on my now closed fist. As she sees what's attached to the other side of the ring, a bottle opener, a small LED torch, and the ignition keys to the Wrangler. I disappear over the edge, bracing myself for what's to come. Nothing else to do, I surrender myself to the long fall, followed into the darkness by the enraged screams of Blue Jay. It's the end of part 7. Okay. About to start in part 8. So, I'm going to just do a quick little break so we can go ahead and do the ads. So that way we don't have to deal with ads mid mid part 8. So be right back. We'll just take 3 minutes. See y'all shortly. Okay, way back. So that's right there. Okay. Okay. Part 8. Hi guys, apologies for the removal of this log a second ago. Not sure why that happened. I should apologize for the delay in posting recently. If I could dedicate all my to finding Alice, then I would. Sadly, I need to work as many crisp shifts as I can get my hands on, especially now that I've decided that I can't continue the investigation effectively from my flat in North London. Been thinking about it for a while, and I've decided that after Christmas I'm going to fly out stateside to follow up on the leads you guys have provided. Hopefully once I'm there I might be able to make some real headway. In the meantime, however, keep any and all insights coming, however small. I really do read all of them. Okay, here's the next log. Left-right game, draft 1. The 14th of February, 2017. In the brief interlude before I hit the ground, I find myself alone with the stars. As I fall backward towards the slope, my gaze rising to meet the night sky, I feel a sudden weightlessness take hold, as if I'm being granted an audience with the heavens. The Richland endless firmament shines down through the canopy of no earthly light to dull its glow, despite everything that's happened. I'm unable to ignore how magnificent it all is, how gracefully detached from the ugliness below. Though the moment lasts no more than a second, it feels longer, like I've been gifted some fleeting respite, a transient sliver of time in which to appreciate the calm and quiet cosmos. A moment to escape, however briefly, from the events that are to come. I don't know how much longer the moment might have lasted. I suppose I never will. It's with a sense of genuine sadness that I turn myself away, twisting my body around in midair, the stars disappearing from view, and I am left staring down the slope into the valley's dark, uncompromising depths. My commune with the heavens has ended, and I'm returning to the cold, unforgiving earth. It doesn't welcome me back. I hit the slope, immediately bouncing off one shoulder and landing on the other, barreling forcefully and unstoppably downhill. My entire body is thrown into chaos, tossing into a frenetic, uncontrollable dance swept along by the rushing earth towards the impatient valley floor. The back of my ankle flails against a hard, jagged rock. My face rolls into a small bloom of stinging nettles, their caustic leaves scraping against my cheek. I battle to bring order to my descent, my hands grasping at the undergrowth, clawing through loose soil in a frenzied search for stability. Rocks and dirt cascade around me as I pull myself onto my back, finally managing to descend with my feet pointed downhill. I regain control just in time, looking ahead to see a large tree bursting out of the hill a few meters below me. A split second before I would have collided with the thick, knotted trunk, I throw myself to the side, my wrist ricocheting against the bark and sending a shooting pain down my arm. The valley's base comes into view, hurtling towards me as I plummet through the rushing undergrowth. I can make out the bodies of the deer who made this hazardous journey before me. I can hear the pained braying of the survivors, moaning in hollow resignation as they struggle to stand on broken legs. A moment later, I join them. The slope doesn't level out gradually just before the bottom. The sharp incline I've been hopelessly traversing drops into a sheer rock face. Before I can stop myself, I'm launched from the slope, kicking dirt into the air. I spin the final 3 meters in free fall, before landing on my hands and knees, my whole body subject to a complete bone-rattling halt. My body tensed and aching, I pick myself up from the valley floor. The second I stumble to my feet, a harsh beam of torchlight strikes the ground to my right. My muscles groaning, I jump back against the natural rock wall as the light swings my way, sweeping directly over the spot where I just landed. Blue jays looking for me. I would have expected nothing less. The beam glides along the ground, scanning the base of the slope, lighting up the twisted bodies of countless deer. Fortunately, The shadow cast by the rock wall offers a measure of sanctuary, shielding me from the torch's restless glare. About half a minute after it arrived, the beam rises through the trees and cuts out. I don't expect her to come after me. I certainly don't expect her to drop down the slope. Perhaps she could walk back down the road, taking a gentler route downhill, and pursue me through the valley once it levels out, but that walk would probably take half an hour each way. If I were her, I wouldn't want to leave the Wrangler unprotected for that long. Despite the fact that she's showing no signs of entering the valley, Blue Jay is clearly eager to locate me. The torch suddenly illuminates the damp soil ahead of me as she points it back down into the valley. I suspect she turned it off just long enough for me to feel overlooked, allowing me to consider stepping out into the open. I also suspect that, should the torchlight find me scrambling around on the valley floor, a bullet would quickly follow, putting me down to lie with the deer. In that moment, all she needed to do was walk down and slip the Wrangler's key from my cold, limp fingers. Catching my breath, my back pressed against the rough rock, while I run through my current priorities. I need to stabilize Rob. I need to lure Blue Jay away from the Wrangler, and most impressingly, I need to contact Lilith. I reach the back of my waistband, my hands searching for my personal walkie-talkie. My fingers touch denim, finding an empty space where the transceiver should be. My stomach drops as I search along my back. It's gone. I've had it with me when I dropped along the slope onto the slope, but at some point during my furious descent, it must have gotten away from me. The torchlight swings back around once more. Though it's something I never thought I'd do, I find myself making a mental inventory of the convoy's radio transceivers. When we set out on the road, Rob handed a walkie-talkie to each of us. Since then, it's safe to assume that those belonging to Ace, Apollo, Eve, Bonnie, and Clyde are no longer in play. Lilith must have lost hers when her car sank into the ground, which is why I gave her rods before she ran to the forest. That just left mine, which could be anywhere on the hillside and Blue Jay's. The torchlight disappears once more. I cautiously lean from the shadows, scanning the forest around me. Blue Jay's walkie-talkie had been in their car when the child pushed it from the road. If I'm correct, that our transceiver is the only one left that I can use to contact Lilith. The car itself doesn't seem to be anywhere around me, as I turn my head and scan the dark hillside. I can see it resting on the slope. The entire car has been stopped mid-fall, resting precariously on its side. The vehicle's crooked undercarriage crumpled around the trunk of an old and battered tree. If I'm going to get in touch with Lilith, I'm going to climb up there. I edge along the rock until Blue Jay's car is almost directly uphill from me. Turning around and running my hands against the damp, shrouding wall, I'm able to discern a few passable handholds. Placing my fingers into a small groove above my head, I jam my boot onto a small outcrop just above the wall and push myself upwards. It isn't an easy climb. My hands are cold, my arms are tired, and I'm certainly not wearing the right shoes. My boots repeatedly slip from their holds, causing my arms to throb as they're forced to bear my weight. After painstakingly scraping up the first 2 meters, I run out of places to put my hands, my outstretched fingers falling roughly 10 inches short of the top. I take a quick breather, letting both arms straighten as I lean back and observe the wall above me. As the torch sweeps past overhead once more, it illuminates a small twisted root on the very edge of the cliff. I have no idea if I can reach it, and there's every chance it will give way immediately, causing me to topple helplessly back to the earth. However, I can already feel my arm weakening, a noticeable ache running up my forearms. I'm no longer going to be able to stay where I am much longer, and I suspect I won't have the energy to make it this far again. Edging my feet up, scrambling the side of my boot against the wall until it sticks in place. I bend my leg slightly, poising myself to make the jump. Gritting my teeth and with a sharp, tentative intake of breath, I swing myself into the air and let go of the wall. I feel grossly vulnerable, hanging in the air with nothing but a fall below me and a harrowing climb awaiting above. I throw my arms forward as I hit the peak of my jump and just manage to catch the root with both hands. A heavy jolt wrenches from my shoulders, threatening to yank me back to the ground. Fear and adrenaline alone sustain my desperate grip. My arms on fire as I swing my leg up to the ledge, hooking my heel over the top after a few clumsy attempts. I force myself over the edge and onto the soft soil, just in time for the torchlight to start circling back towards me. With one final surge of effort, I push my aching body upright and struggle over to the nearest tree, falling at its base and pressing myself against the bark. The light travels quickly, the tree's darkening shadow rings over the right, covering me, then fading again as it stretches out to the left. The light leaves me in darkness, certain to return soon as Blue Jay continues her frenzied surveillance. It started to rain a little. A few sporadic droplets fall through the sparse canopy and land on my outstretched palm. It doesn't take long before these scouts are reinforced by a steady downpour, drumming against the leaves and grass, soaking through the loam. The already punishing incline is going to prove completely unclimbable if the rain has enough time to slicken the grass and pound the soil into mud. Also doubt I'll be able to make the initial climb again, especially if the rock wall becomes coated in a layer of cold rain. As much as I have to move quickly up to the car, I also need to move carefully. It's becoming increasingly clear that this will be my only attempt at reaching the radio. The vehicle is only a short climb away. I can see its undercarriage laying against the tree, the entire left side of the vehicle pressed into the ground. Only now I'm nearby do I hear the ominous creaking sound that emanates from the car, as it rocks almost imperceptibly around a thin focal point. I wait for the torchlight to swing past me once more before pulling myself out from the shadow of the tree. My dirt-covered hands grasping at any conceivable purchase, I crawl up the bank towards Blue Jay's vehicle. My feet slip on the grass with every other step as the rain seeps into the ground, soaking through my fleece. I'm completely exposed as I make my way on towards the car. Though it remains a constant concern, the torch seems to be exploring another section of the hill as I arrive beneath the chassis, the undercarriage looming imposingly over me. I briefly glance up to check on Blue Jay's movements, then slowly, steadying myself against the incredible incline, I climb out into the open once more and pull myself up until I'm in line with the warped, twisted hood. Blue Jay's transceiver is still fastened with its dock. Despite the car's battered condition, the windshield is frustratingly intact, with nothing more than a small, jagged, irregular hole near its center. It will take a bit of maneuvering, but it should be just big enough to reach through and pull the radio free. Slowly and tentatively, I thread my arm through the center of the opening. Shards of serrated glass sit circling my skin. My hands reach the dashboard, slowly brushing along its surface towards the walkie-talkie as I lean into the car. The torchlight starts to swing back across the hill. Blue Jay is walking along the ledge in frantic mission to find me. In my current position, out in the open and trapped in a slow and delicate procedure, there's no way I can get out of the way in time. My hand grasps the transceiver as the light reaches me, though I'm ashamed to admit it, for a brief moment, drowned in the revealing glare of the torch's beam. I'm stunned into inaction. The light has stopped moving, fixed directly on me, casting my stark shadow down into the valley. I can imagine Blue Jay's triumphant glare as her desperate search is finally rewarded. Returning to my senses all too late, I grit my teeth and wrench the walkie-talkie from its dock. With no time for grace or care, I retract my arm from the windshield, inhaling sharply as an aberrant shard of glass scrapes across the back of my hand. It turns out I have greater things to worry about, as I hear a loud bang from up the top of the hill, followed instantaneously by a disgusting zipping sound that flashes past my ear. I flinch instinctively from the noise, my sudden reaction causing my boots to give way beneath me. I slam into the earth and career down the hill. With little control I have over the slope, I give way in a desperate bid to roll into the car's shadow and out of the light. I don't have time to right myself as I'm dragged chaotically down towards the valley and cast over the edge once more. The base of the valley flashes into mere seconds before my body slams into it. The air is ripped out of my lungs, my pain cry forming a visible plume of steam that dissipates in the cold night air. I lay on my side, cradling the walkie-talkie in my hands. At the very least, I've managed to keep a hold of it. The torch dances erratically around my position. I pick myself up and drag my body the last few centimeters, collapsing against the wall as the torch beam lights up the ground in front of me. As I raise the radio, I realize my hands are shaking violently. I don't think I've ever been as close to death as when that bullet passed by me, and although the noise itself died quickly, its horrific implications echo in my skull. Blue Jay shot Rob as a bargaining chip to drag us out of the Wrangler. It was a show of force, a power play. The bullet that she fired just in my direction had no nuance, no pretense, no objective other than its primary function. Blue Jay's prepared to kill me, which means he's prepared to kill any of us. I raise the transceiver and switch through the channels until I find Rob's frequency. This is Bristol to Lilith. Bristol to Lilith, do you copy? The radio crackles as I release the button. I wait 20 interminable seconds for Lilith to respond. She doesn't. This is Bristol to Lilith. Can you hear me? This time I let a minute pass, still nothing. Everything I've been struggling for since I jumped into the valley has come inside the wall of silence. Feel a swell of frustration inside me. It isn't fair. Jin. Jin, are you there? Another minute goes by. I sit in silence the whole time, watching as the radio I risk my life to collect transforms into a useless hunk of plastic. While I loosen my grip and let it drop into the wet soil. I bring my legs up to my body, wrap my arms around them, and rest my head against my knees. Moment of rest. My breathing becomes shallow. A set of fresh tears well up behind my eyes, spilling out down my face. The rain falls around me as I quietly cry, sitting in the middle of a dark forest, muddy and injured and alone. I'm ripped out of my melancholy as the rain is blasted in every conceivable direction, whipping against my face and splattering against the rock with incredible force. The air is whipped into a furious maelstrom, and a familiar booming sound crashes through the ether. I've watched you struggle. As soon as it arrives, the voice is gone. The winds quiet down and the rain begins to drop vertically once again. Hello? Hello, who is that? The air is still, absent of everything but the rain. I wipe the tears from my face as I call out to the air. Can you help me? Please, can you just... The voice has disappeared. I suspect I won't be hearing it again anytime soon. Perhaps it just wants me to know that it's watching. One thing is certain. If the voice is attempting to bring me comfort or make me feel less alone, that its methods are horribly misguided. Alice, are you there? My eyes fixate on the crackling radio. Alice, are you still there? I'm sorry I couldn't... Jin, are you okay? Are you safe? Yeah, okay, I thought you were... What happened to you? I jumped down the hill. Got Blue Jay's walkie. She shot at me. How have you been? She's gone crazy. I made it to a clearing in the woods, straight on for the car. At least I hope it is. I still haven't seen that thing anywhere. Well, it's a big force. Maybe it's gone. Can you stay near the clearing? Yeah, I can keep heading nearby. What are you gonna do? I'm going to make my way to you, and we're going to get Blue Jay away from the Wrangler. How? I'm still working on that. I'm about half an hour away. Keep your volume down, but stay in touch, alright? Okay, will do. I'm glad you're alright, Alice. Yeah, you too, Jen. I fastened the radio to my waistband. My body still aches from the fall, blood dripping slowly from my hand, and my fingers are almost numb from the cold. Yet hearing Lila's voice on the other end of the radio has brought back something I lost in the valley. A sense of resolve that jumpstarts my tired muscles, pushes me to my feet, and sets me off to rejoin the road. I'm still stuck in the middle of a dark forest. I'm still muddied, bloodied, and injured, but I'm no longer alone. It isn't long before my boots hit asphalt. I follow the road, sticking to the tree line as I work my way back up the hill. I'm reluctant to place myself within sight of the Wrangler, where Blue Jay will almost certainly be camped out and waiting. Unfortunately, it's the only point of reference in an otherwise unknowable forest, the only location from where Lilith's location can be divined. Once the road levels out, I take the precaution of heading deeper into the forest. The road is almost impossible to see now, but it'll need the cover if Blue Jay is still on the lookout. Even though I'm only a few meters deep, the woods fill me with a palpable sense of unease. Every shadow feels predatory. Every twig that snaps under my foot sounds like the crack of a whip. When the Wrangler comes into view, Blue Jay's nowhere to be seen. With curiosity getting the better of me, I creep closer to the road, observing the scene as the trees thin out. The place is deserted, with neither Blue Jay or Rob anywhere to be seen. I have no idea what could have forced her to move on. Perhaps he managed to get away. Something feels wrong. Creeping up on the Wrangler, I find the passenger's side window broken. 1,000 splinters of glass spilled across the ground, trodden into the mud. The glove box has been left open, the boxes of ammunition either emptied or removed. The next thing I notice makes my blood run cold and forces me to curse my own stupidity. The light on the CB radio was on. When I'd reached the bottom of the hill, I'd correctly calculated the number of active radios, arriving at the conclusion that only me and Lilith would be able to communicate. Technically, I'd been right. We were the only two who could talk, but that didn't mean we were the ones who could listen. I'd forgotten that the CB radio in Rob's car had its own independent battery and inbuilt speaker. Most importantly, he'd been using it throughout the trip to broadcast and receive across all our frequencies. I switched the frequency of my walkie to a random channel, lift the receiver to my mouth and hold the talk button. Bristol to all cars. My voice crackles out of the CB radio. Blue Jay must have known I was going to contact Lilith, and she'd broken into the Wrangler to spy on the conversation. I can't believe I didn't think about it before now. I switched the radio back to Lilith's frequency. Lilith, you need to get moving. Blue Jay heard us. She's not listening. She's not listening now, but she knows I'm meeting you near the clearing. Get yourself back here, okay? Can you hear me? Bring me my fucking key, Alice. My heart sinks. Now it makes sense why Blue Jay wasn't guarding the Wrangler. She'd eavesdropped onto my conversation instead of waiting for me to get back up the hill. She'd gone after Lilith. Despite all my efforts, all my good intentions, I led Blue Jay right to her. Blue Jay. Where's Lilith? She's here. She's here. I hear a refrain of quiet sobbing in the background of the call. I can hear Lilith meekly calling up my name. Okay, let me speak to her. What? No. You're not gonna trick me again, us. You don't get to confer. Get to bring me the key to my car. Then you get to walk yourselves back home. Now, what about that do you need to discuss? Blue Jay, this isn't... We're not your enemy, Denise. Please, you have to believe me. Like I'll ever believe a word you say. My keys, and if you pull any more tricks, I'll put a bullet in your skull. Now, do you believe that? And do you believe that? Waits patiently for my answer. I suddenly feel like we've entered an entirely new realm. Blue Jay has the upper hand, and under the threat of fierce, unthinkable consequence, become the subjects of her domain. Reason, diplomacy, and sanity no longer hold sway over proceedings. As long as she is Lilith remaining at the end of that rifle, I'm beholden to her madness. Fine. Okay, I'm on my way. Good. Need to remember, Les, I didn't want any of you brought me here. Blue Jay lets go of the button, returning me to a familiar silence. If I keep the keys from her, Lilith will be at her mercy, and although Blue Jay can't really afford to kill her bargaining chip, I have no doubt she'll be willing to hurt her as much as she needs in order to force my compliance. If I let her take the Wrangler, however, we're both dead anyway. I take a moment to look through my options. It doesn't take long. There aren't that many left. My journey through the forest is uncomfortable, and rings with an unsettling finality, like a guilty child heading towards an unavoidable reckoning. I'm overcome by a pervasive dread which builds, and with every step I do my best to keep the Wrangler behind me, carving a straight line through the woods, when all it takes me less than 5 minutes before the clearing opens up ahead of me. Blue Jay is planted in the very center of a large glade, leaving too much exposed ground in every direction for me to even contemplate an ambush. Rob's torch lies at her feet, as she keeps both her hands firmly wrapped around the rifle. Lilith kneels beside her, and the barrel of the gun placed against her temple, her tear-stained face contorted by a mixture of despair and vitriolic anger. Our hands rest against her lap, our wrists bound by the same brand of cable ties I'd used to restrain Bonnie. I can imagine Blue Jay bristled with poetic justice when she ordered Lilith to fasten the band around her wrists. They both see me as soon as I step out the trees. You're late. I got turned around. Lilith, are you okay? Stop walking, stop walking. Blue Jay grips the rifle more tightly, sending me an unignorable message. She's keeping me at a good distance. She knows it takes her a second or two to reload the rifle, and she wants me far back enough to allow time for at least 2 consecutive shots. Everything she does, every action she takes demonstrates that she's preparing to act swiftly against us, should anything untoward take place. Lilith, are you okay? I'm okay. Hand over the keys, Alice. Blue Jay, take her back with you, please. Have to let her. You can drop her off at a police station as soon as you're home, but just take her home. Hand me the keys. Fine. I have them in my bag. Let me... Hey, what are you doing? Jay snaps me as I reach into my bag, pointingly jabbing the rifle against Lilith, with cries with distress as the barrel repeatedly prods her temple. I take my hand out of my bag and slip it slowly from my shoulder. Every move I make is being considered a potential act of subterfuge. Fine, here. I swing my bag in a slow arc and throw it over to Blue Jay. It lands in the wet dirt about a meter in front of her. That's better. Jay steps forward, momentarily letting the gun's barrel slip from Lilith's temple. She quickly bends down and places the bag over her shoulder, Jin extracting the key to the Wrangler and placing it in her jacket pocket. Fleeting second of distraction. I watch Lilith raise her hands high above her head and swing her elbows down to her side in a single fluid motion. The zip tie snaps open. Without wasting a second, Lilith launches herself at Blue Jay, grabbing her waist from behind and trying to force her to the ground. Shocked at the suddenness of it all, but aware that this may be our only chance, I find myself sprinting across the clearing towards the pair of them. Blue Jay is taken by surprise following Lilith's assault, but she adapts to the situation quickly, planting one foot in front to brace her sudden momentum. She stops herself from being brought down at the same time she swings the stock of the rifle down to her side, where it meets Lilith's face with a sickening crack. You bitch! Lilith is knocked on her back, dazed and hurt. Without hesitation, Blue Jay swings the rifle down and fires a shot into the girl's stomach. I find myself trapped in the moment, as if reality itself is stunned by the madness taking place before it, unsure how it will continue on. The sound of the shot thunders through my consciousness. The same time seems distant, otherworldly. I can't bring myself to speak, my lips uselessly parted as Lilith's fitful cries resound uninterrupted throughout the clearing. What have you done? What have you... Blue Jay is backing quickly away from Lilith, putting space between the two of us while she struggles to reload. She was right to keep me at a distance early on. She'd given herself more than enough time to draw a I can pull it into the chamber and click the bolt into position. No more tricks, Alice. Before I know it, I spoke into a final desperate sprint, casting wet mud behind me as I dashed towards the shelter of the tree line. I can imagine Blue Jay leveling the rifle, lowering her eyes to the sights. The shot echoes through the cold air, flying wide and perishing with a distant thud. As I reach the edge of the clearing, I throw myself behind the thick trunk of the nearest tree. My back presses against the rough bark as I listen for any movement behind me. Twigs snap beneath Blue Jay's feet as she advances towards me. You did this to yourselves. You did this with your lies and your tricks and your games. Well, I'm not playing anymore. A shot grazes the tree, ricocheting off into the woods. I can hear her beginning to strafe around my position, poised and ready to fire as soon as she gets an angle. You kept lying right until the end. Everything you've done, everything you are, you monster. Put a bullet in your skull and I won't feel a thing. From the moment she'd first opened her mouth, spilling her bitter, dogmatic cynicism into our group, I've been waiting for Blue Jay to realize she was wrong. Every so often, in a quiet moment, I'd catch myself fantasizing about the stark and esoteric phenomenon that would stop her tongue and force her to accept the truth. I realize now that there was never going to be such a moment, that nothing lies beyond her powers of self-delusion. She was lost to us, lost to the road, a twisted woman driven by her own rationality, driven mad by her own rationality. My hand slips into my pocket. You know what, Blue Jay? I believe you. Next thing I hear is a faint, nostalgic ringtone. A sudden, deafening bang. The brief time I was afforded, following my tense call with Blue Jay, I had taken one of Rob's knives to the block of C4, cutting away almost everything around the blasting cap. The block was less than a pound in weight when I'd slipped it into the compartment of my satchel and buttoned it up. I was wondering if Blue Jay had asked for the key. I made sure to reach into my bag enthusiastically. I had a feeling she'd see my eagerness as a potential trap, allowing me a chance to throw her the satchel. She didn't trust anything I did, and it had made her predictable. I step out from behind the tree and look towards Blue Jay, lying broken on the forest ground. A large section of her abdomen removed by the blast, her arm, shoulder, and upper thigh virtually non-existent. She struggles to breathe as blood fills her airway. I was... Turn aside from her and run towards Lilith. I drop to my knees, beside her, grasping one of her hands. She grips my fingers weakly. Her eyes are starting to drift shut, opening in for briefer and briefer intervals. Hey, Jen. Hey, Alice. She speaks softly, her words hardly making it through the intense ringing in my ears. Try to stay awake, Alice. Try to stay awake, Jen. You're going to be all right, okay? We'll stop the bleeding and we'll get you patched up. Back at the Wrangler. We've got Roswell in the spring. It's your bed, we'll go there together, okay, Jen? Jen. She manages to open her eyes once more. The look she gives me is kind and heartbreakingly knowing. I can't help but think back our time on the cliffside. Overlooking the vast ocean of fields, she'd asked me how many people had died being told comforting lies. She asked how many of them knew. I can't speak for anyone else, but as she stares up at me, hushing me with a look, I can tell that she does. I wish we could have been friends for longer. I can't bring myself to speak. Every word seems too small, too insubstantial, too wholly insignificant to be the last thing she might hear. All I can do is stare into Lilith's eye as her faltering breath rises in clouds of pale steam. Clouds that grow slowly thinner and thinner until nothing rises at all. I lay her hand on the ground and let her fingers slip gently from my grasp. My legs kick me over to Blue Jay. My hand reaches her pockets and lifts out the key to the Wrangler. The metal is irreparably bent, with no hope of fitting back into the ignition. This was the potential outcome which had rendered the C4 a last resort, only be used if my life was in immediate danger. It had done its job. I was alive, but I was also stuck in this forest. I can't bring myself to care about that right now. My mind is numb to the concept of future suffering. With no space left to contemplate tomorrow's potential trials, the horrors of the present are hard enough to face. My mind eclipsed by more darkness than I can process. The only glimmering shred of solace I can muster comes from the wishful belief that I've now seen all the terrors this night has to offer. As I turned towards the Wrangler, I found myself proven wrong once again. I stand stock still as the child's crooked form staggers out from the tree line. It looks markedly different now, a patchwork malformation of adolescence, adulthood, and old age. The face, however, is still juvenile, and filled with an innocent sorrow as it lurches towards Blue Jay on uneven feet. It doesn't seem to have noticed me. I back away from Blue Jay and step towards Lilith, where Rob's LED torch still lays on the ground. The child reaches Blue Jay, observing her silent, mangled frame. Through my dampening hearing, I could just make out a heartbroken whine. Continue to back away as it lifts Blue Jay's limp arm, shaking it wildly as if attempting to view it with some semblance of animation. Frustrated tears dripping freely from its chin, the child throws Blue Jay's wrist back down against the ground. As it looks away from her broken body and turns its face to me, I watch as the soft, innocent features contract into a scowl of juvenile rage, signifying the inceptive throes of a tantrum that could eviscerate anything in its path. A few seconds of calm, I feel my boot brushed up against the torch, bending slowly, keeping my eyes on the child for as long as I can. I reach down with my right hand and lift it from the ground. My hopes that I wouldn't have to use it are dashed instantly. The child drops onto its hands and legs, letting out a tortured, ferocious scream, and races towards me with staggering velocity. I dodge out of the way at the last possible moment, hitting the soft dirt as the child skitters to a stop behind me. Time it takes to turn itself around, I've switched on the torch. Once again, the child is hit by a powerful beam of light. Its body lurches in spasms, its skin pulling and stretching over elongated bones. Crying out in pain, its voice deepening with every passing second. The disjointed figure dashes in my direction, clasping my right arm in its hands and slamming me down onto the ground. The torch swings wildly as the creature climbs on top of me, tearing the fabric from my right sleeve, digging its nails into the skin just above my elbow. It doesn't stop at the skin. I feel the hot electric agony of scraped nerve endings, hear the sickening snap of breaking bone before I lose my chance forever. I throw the torch weakly from my right hand and catch it in my left, pressing the beam directly into the child's face. It screams a scream of decades. The child's eyes roll back into its head, overpowered by the brutal onslaught the light has wrought. I look on its face melts and flickers through adolescence, through adulthood and middle age. The tortured scream grows hoarse and weak as its skin wrinkles and sags, rushing beyond human years into an untouched realm of decrepitude. Eventually its eyes glaze over, and its once powerful scream becomes nothing more than a grating rattle. I feel the pitiful, lifeless creature fall to the ground beside me as I roll myself onto my knees. I stumble along the ground towards Blue Jay, failing repeatedly, a stream of red soaking onto the behind me. Once I reach her, I use my left hand to unfasten those leather shoulder strap. I clumsily form the strap into a loop, passing it beneath my right shoulder. My head feels light, struggling to maintain focus. I grab a stick from the ground and place it through the knot of the loop, using my teeth to draw the knots securely closed around it. My left hand twists the stick over and over again, each turn tightening the leather strap until it bites into my skin. The bleeding lessens, but not nearly enough. Picking up my tired frame, barely able to keep myself upright, I place one foot painstakingly in front of the other, struggling over the damp ground out of the clearing and into the trees. I need to get back to the Wrangler. I can feel everything starting to fade. Even the ringing in my ears is dulled, my vision blurry. I lock the stick under my armpit, freeing up my left hand to brace me as I start to stumble against the trees. The more I lose my faculties, the less capable I am of perceiving their decline, but I know they're slipping away all too quickly. As I struggle further through the woods, a figure steps out from the trees, stopping me in my tracks. I sway on my feet as I try to identify what I'm seeing. The very act of standing now required constant, dogged attention. I've never seen the figure before. It seems to be composed of a constantly shifting maelstrom of crackling, monochromatic sparks. An electric cloud of black, white, and gray, formed into a humanoid shape. As soon as it sees me, the humanoid creature falls backward, scrambling away from me across the ground, more terrified of me than I am of him. I don't know if the entity is malignant or benign, but in my current state, my mind softly screaming against the dying light, I can't make the distinction. As it backs up against a mound of earth, I try to ask it for help. The requisite words have already been lost to the advancing fog, and all I can do is reach out my hand towards him, attempting to entreat some spark of humanity within the fizzling, shifting figure. In response to my vague plea, the entity scampers off into the forest, tripping over itself before disappearing from view. As I watch it leave, a single dim beacon ignites in the far corners of my swiftly vanishing mind, a single light whose implications kickstart my fading reasoning and force beyond through the forest. I can see the Wrangler through the trees. It's close by, yet at the same time impossibly far away. There's something wrong with my eyes. The car shifts in and out of focus, but every time it comes back in view, the image is less sharp, until it exists as a pulsing dark green blur against a dull, slowly swaying backdrop. My boots kick up against one another, a final stumble that brings me down to the earth. When I try to get up again, I find that I'm completely unable. There's no strength left in my body, and no amount of resolve can raise me back to my feet. Though it may be in my imagination, I think I can hear a steady rustling through the undergrowth, as if something were making its way towards me. Soon after, my senses start to die away, leaving me with nothing more than the cold and the silence for company. The dim light shines until the end, however. The single strand of revelation, solitary thought that I attempt to hold aloft from the all-consuming fog. It's a memory, a vague recollection from my first interview with Rob J. Guthard. It was the day we met, the day he told me about his long and meandering life, Japan, Hiroji, Aokigahara, and the strange phenomenon he saw which sparked his obsession with the supernatural. The singular event that started him down the road to the left-right game that led to this excursion. The moment that brought us here. It walked up to me through the trees. Looked like static you see on a TV screen, but it had a human shape almost. Almost. It was missing an arm. Wait, she was the thing? Dang. Also, that is the end of part 8. Ooh, that's a good reveal right there. Yup. No, my teapot is empty now. I just have a few mouthfuls left. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna have to take a quick break. But we'll be right back. And hopefully with this one, that means we won't have to take another break for the rest of the stream. Or finishing this up, so see you in just 3 minutes. Be right back. Okay. Alright, let's do this thing. Part 9. Sorry I've not been in touch, guys. It's been a busy month. However, I'm pleased to announce that as of yesterday night, I finally touched down in Phoenix, Arizona. I'm posting this log from my first American hotel room, which offers a gorgeous view of both the state hospital and a local prison. Auspicious times. Drop me a line if you're in the city or have any information at all. The Left-Right Game. The 15th of February, 2017. As the darkness closes in, I find myself dragged deeper and deeper into the depths of my own subconscious, till I sink through the back of my mind into an indescribable place. A featureless, directionless, timeless void that exists at the weakest point of life. I can feel myself drifting away, surrendered to an almost imperceptible tide, carried slowly but inexorably from the world. The rest of the night unfolds in fleeting snapshots. I briefly feel my body lift up from the ground, gravity pulling at my limbs as I'm conveyed to the forest. A knowable stretch of time later, I feel a distinct burning sensation to my right. In the world I currently inhabit, only an echo of pain reaches me, but I can tell that it was once substantial. Unable to define its purpose, I let the sensation fade away, before descending once more into the placid darkness. When my eyes finally work themselves open, the sun is beginning to rise. Without an ounce of strength left in my body, all I can do is peer through my eyelashes, taking in the vague scene before me. I'm in the back of the Wrangler, propped up against a soft pillar of luggage. There's somebody kneeling beside me, tugging at my right shoulder. When I try to address them, I discover that my voice has withered to a spectral whisper, so frail that it hardly exists at all. Rob. Hearing my voice, the figure shuffles around and kneels before me, staring into... They slowly regain their focus. You just lay back, Miss Sharma. I just finished patching you up, but I gotta make sure it's good work. What's happened to you? Denise had me at gunpoint. Had to act like I was all but dead. She went to the forest, I got free, took the medkit into the trees, fixed myself up a little. I was coming to help when I heard the awful noise. Went to check it out. That's when I found you. Is the engine running? Wanted to warm up the place for you. You were in shock, and since the battery don't run down anymore, I thought... No, I mean, how the key it got. You'd think I'd risk getting out this far with only one copy of my car key? Rob seems almost insulted. And thinking back to everything I've learned about him over the course of this trip, I can see why he might be. Even in my weakened state, I can't help but laugh, though it admittedly comes out as a stilted wheezing, diffusing quietly into the air. No, that's actually very you. I think Blue Jay would have appreciated that information last night. Yeah, well, she didn't ask. I'm glad you made it, Rob. Glad you made it too. They build them tough down in London. I rest my head back against the luggage. I'm from Bristol. Of course, yeah. Of course, sorry. Rob tries to recover his smile, but it slips quickly from his grasp. In his absence, his features cringe into sudden, uncontrollable sadness. Miss Sharma, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. Rob Guthard's withered face bursts into a heaving mess of tears. He repeats those two words as he lumbers towards me, throwing his arms around my waist and resting his head on my left shoulder. My hand feels like lead as I raise it up and brush it against his hair, holding him against me. As the man continues to sob, I let my head roll slightly to the right, observing the damage to my arm. Last night, lost in the metal throes of shock, the harm had been unquantifiable. The details round out by the encompassing haze of severe blood loss and blaring primal alarm which had forced me to move without questioning why. Now I'm on the other side, bathed in the quiet warmth of the Wrangler. I'm able to fully assess the extent of my injury. Everything below my right elbow is gone. It feels almost like a dream. My upper arm is practically unblemished save for a few dark bruises from last night's fall. Yet it descends an impossibly short distance before ending in a blunt, surreal stump. The wound itself is hidden from view, swaddled in fresh, white bandages. I can't seem to figure out how I should feel, and consequently, I don't seem to feel anything. It's okay, Rob. It's okay. I never meant for any of this to... I know. Rob pulls back, his eyes still watering. I'll take you home, okay? I'll find somewhere to turn around and we'll get you home. I can tell Rob's offer is genuine, and to be honest, I'm a little surprised. I still remember our verbal agreement, forged at the mouth of the tunnel, that we would not be turning his car around until he reached the road's end. I never expected he'd be the one to renege on the deal. Aware this could be my best chance to leave it all behind, to flee from the horrors of the road, before they take even more of me. I know the way back. I know it leads to safety, to family, to blessed normality. However, as an insidious voice in the back of my mind quietly notes, it doesn't lead to answers. I'm still game if you are. Rob sends me a heartbroken smile, which I would return if I had the strength. In that moment, a somber understanding develops between us. An understanding that of everything we've seen, everything that's happened, we're both still choosing the secrets of the road. The decision reveals something about us, exposing our driving force behind our actions that negates our concern for survival and overshadows the imagined protests of our loved ones. It's a decision only two broken people would make. Rob spends the morning packing up the Wrangler, giving me time to rest. The fact that he's walking around at all is remarkable, let alone conducting his usual routine as he's at his usual pace. So I begin to feel life crawl slowly back into my veins. I wonder whether the strange force that has sustained us both, as well as the Wrangler's fuel take, could also have a mild restorative effect. The notion should bring me comfort. Instead, it makes me feel like a lobster in a tank. A few hours later, Rob carries me out of the car, letting me rest in doorframe. In front of me lie 3 mounds of dirt, raised slightly from the surrounding earth. 2 are headed by crosses, formed from knotted sticks bound tightly together. The grave on the far left lies bare, bereft of any religious affiliation. Is that Blue Jays without the crosses? Without the cross? Didn't think she'd want one. She wouldn't have done that for you, you know. Good thing I ain't her then. I buried what I could. But that was some state she was in. Did the child kill her? Rob goes to throw a foldable spade into the car. For a brief moment, I consider letting his statement go unanswered. No, it didn't. I did. Rob immediately marches back around, his brow furrowed in confusion. I hid a C4 charge in my satchel. When she took the bag, I gesture to the bare grave. Rob looks as if he's seeing me for the first time. Where did you... From your son's car. I watch as my quiet assertion strikes Rob's ears, as its meaning burrows through his consciousness, its implications contorting his features into a look of shame and damning revelation. I can tell from his reaction that I've got it right. We haven't had a chance to speak since I learned his son's name. That piece of information formed the crucial thread, stringing together the strange and seemingly incongruent discoveries I had encountered on the road. Early in the week, I may have been worried to confront him with this information, but things are different now. We've come too far, we've been through too much, and if he's truly ferrying me somewhere with malicious intent, I'm powerless to stop him anyway. I raise a weak hand towards him, a quiet request for assistance. I think it's time we had a second interview. Following a tense and guilty silence, Rob simply nods and helps me into the passenger seat. It wasn't military. It was commercial. The Wrangler continues to crawl through the forest. I've stayed quiet for almost half an hour, letting Rob formulate a response to his own words in his own time. Commercial? Yeah. Explosive charges for controlled demolition. Bobby was in the business, had his own firm. He must have been proud. Yeah, he built that place up from nothing. Touring his office was one of the best days of my life. So how did he end up out here? Rob grows quiet, reluctantly accepting that he'll have to start from the beginning. Bobby was a smart kid. Smarter than I ever was. He could have run the farm at 15, but country life didn't take. Instead, he moved to Phoenix, picked up a college degree, got himself a steady career. A steady career? That's pretty rebellious for a Guthard. Huh. Well, we were pretty different people. Didn't always get along. I was still a courier in those days, always jetting off somewhere new. Of course, I went to Japan, stayed there for a while. Aokigahara. That's right. Changed everything. Came home after 5 years with a new hobby. Bobby didn't care for the stories, but his ma had died sudden while I was away. We both wanted to start over, be in each other's lives more often. He came with me to the Pacific Northwest, tracking down Sasquatch. Creature didn't show, but Bobby had a good time camping, so he kept joining me. Before long, he was doing the research himself, organizing trips, picking up rumors of strange stuff all across the country. Sounds like a nice time for you both. It was. So it was Bobby who discovered the left-right game. He called up one day out of the blue. This was about 3 years ago. Said he had found a set of rules. Said we should try it out. To be honest, I thought our tripping days were over. I was back in Alabama and he was starting up a family of his own. But suddenly he's telling me to meet him in Phoenix, so of course I went along. And this time you both realized it was real. Bobby knew as soon as we reached the tunnel. He passed that way every day. Knew it wasn't supposed to be there, but there it was. He said that was the most amazing thing he ever saw. We charted over the next year, whenever we could get the time together. We moved slow, mapping the place out. Turned back on the regular. It took us a while before we got the courage to stay on the road overnight. Both of us were terrified the tunnel would disappear or something. I can tell Rob is replaying the events in his head. The reminiscence almost makes him smile. Bobby's wife was a real doll. Used to work in his office. Kindest girl I ever met. Funny, too. There was a decade between them, but you could tell them they were good for each other. He shared everything with her, including the road. In fact, once Bobby got a little more secure with the rules, they started to map it together, exploring their own little world. After a brief pause, Rob's expression sinks slightly, the reminiscences growing darker. Few months go by. I'm hearing from Bobby a little less, but I expected that. Then one evening I get a call from the hospital. Telling me a boy had walked into some ER in Phoenix. Was he okay? Nah, he was in a bad way. Leg all busted up, delirious. Asking for Marjorie. They found her bag in his car, but she was nowhere to be found. Bobby lost her on the road. Yeah, that's right. On our second night here, after we lost Ace, you told me the road had never hurt one before. Well, that wasn't a lie, at least. It wasn't the road that got him. What do you mean? They made it to the forest. None of us had gotten that far before, but this time they pushed a little further than usual. Do you know why? They were going to have a kid. Marjorie was almost due, wasn't traveling so well. I think they knew they wouldn't be hitting the road for a while, so it was like Like a last hurrah, I guess. But only Bobby came back. They explored the woods till nightfall, and Bobby said they had to turn back. Marjorie didn't want to. He never told me why, never told me what happened. By the end of that trip, Marjorie was still out there, and he was in a hospital bed. Rob takes a moment to collect himself, to put the facts in order. The trees are starting to grow thin, sunlight bursting through the widening gaps in the canopy. Looks like we're nearing the forest's end. Bobby took a month or so to recover. Bob was desperate to get his wife back. Of course, he'd become a suspect in her disappearance. Say the first thing he did was hit onto the road to find Marjorie. But he didn't. Nope. He found her. Just a little sooner than he thought. I took a moment to process Rob's implication. Suddenly, I feel a stone drop in my stomach. She was on the 34th turn. Rob nods solemnly. Wasn't the woman he knew, of course. Stood there all day just mumbling about the road. Didn't even recognize him. Murray called me up right after he saw her there. His heart breaking. He tried almost every day from then on, always stopping at that turn. He'd yell, he'd plead, he'd bring pictures and gifts, but she never responded. Don't know if it was really her, but whatever was on that corner, it belonged to the road. Bobby lost something of himself on that corner. After a while, his fascination with the game turned sour, turned to hate. He thought the road was something evil, that it had no place linking it to our world. I was checking up on him at that point. For a few days or so. One weekend he said he was doing better. Said he'd been to work. I thought maybe things were turning around, but then he went quiet. Didn't pick up his phone for 3 days. I had my place in Phoenix by that point and a spare key to his house. That's where I found the note, telling me he'd gone back through one last bid to find his wife, and if he couldn't bring her back, well, he was going to destroy the tunnel. Cut the road off from the world. I played the game in Phoenix, Chicago a few different places, but that one tunnel is what links you to the road. I looked around his garage, found the box for a phone. Lot of electronics all over the place. Pretty clear what he'd done, so I jump in my car. We pass out of the forest into a long, narrow road. Distance I see our route winding up a towering wall of sandstone, disappearing into a set of rolling mountains. He passed me on his way back, just before I hit Jubilation. Thundering down the road at full speed, driving like crazy. That's when I knew he hadn't found her, that he was going to take out the tunnel, end the game once and for all. But he never got that far. I tried to talk to him, call his cell, tried the radio frequencies. There was a number on the SIM card documentation that he had. God help him, I even messaged him that one. At the end, it was just me and him racing back to Phoenix. He was faster than me, but I was driving better. After a few bad corners, I caught up. He ran him off the road. Stares at faraway ridges, his hands grasping the steering wheel. Cell service don't work through the tunnel. He knew that. He was either going to blow up on this side or while he was in there. So you were trying to save him or save yourself? So you were trying to save him or save yourself? Neither. I was trying to save the road. Say what you want about this place, Miss Sharma, but it's a doorway out of everything we've ever known. It's a road out of reality. It may be the most significant frontier we ever cross. And that's part of me knew. That was too important for one man to take away. For the second time today, Rob battles back tears, and for the second time he fails. They roll silently down his cheek as he continues on. He was more injured than I thought. He'd hurt himself bad before he reached me. That's why he was headed to the tunnel so quick. He wanted to destroy it while he still could. The road had taken almost everything from him, and then I took the rest. I denied him his hope, took away his chance to leave the world on his own terms. In the end, he didn't even seem angry. He just asked after Marjorie. Asked me why she did it, why she left. I laid him to rest there, visited the place often, but I never had a good answer for him. That's when I started prepping for the long run. So you posted those logs online and pretended to discover them. Thought people would ask less questions that way. And where did we all fit into this? Why did you bring us here with you? I guess I thought it was time the world knew. Didn't want all this to end up an old man's secret. Honest to God, if I knew the road was gonna... I swear I never would have brought you here. Rob's features tighten, all his shame and guilt rising to the fore. I can't say it isn't deserved. Despite his attentions, despite his penitence, the man had blinded himself to clear dangers, hurt those closest to him, and, on a road where secrets had killed so many, he'd kept the most significant one of all. Well, perhaps not the most significant. You didn't bring us here, Rob. Rob turns me confused. I met someone in the forest last night. A figure just like the one you saw in Japan. Looked like static you see on a TV screen. I think it was you, Rob. I think I saw you, and I think that all those years ago. In my current state, the mechanics of the event and their stunning implications lie beyond my explanatory capacity. In the end, I just raise my lost right arm and wait for Rob to make the connection. A moment later, the car screeches to a halt. Rob stares straight ahead, his knuckles white against the steering wheel, aware that beneath his stone-set features every square inch of gray matter is fighting to process the fresh revelation. If it's true that in those quiet woods I somehow reached across the decades to a young Rob Guthard, then it changes everything. The twisting narrative that led us to this point, Rob's burgeoning obsession, his son's tragic fate, they all took root in that single moment, more than a decade prior to my own birth. I'd placed us on a path which would lead me to his door. As chaotic as the road often seems, that moment in the forest hints at something deeper, something intentional. Rob steps out of the car for a while, before wordlessly climbing back and then firing up the Wrangler. From that point on, we continue as two silent passengers lost in thought, disappearing into the sandstone mountains. We travel across the thin mountain road for the next 2 hours, a wall of crooked rock hemming us in. We pass on to the other side, and the outcrop falls away. The landscape below us has changed completely, and we're treated to a strange and breathtaking sight. The Wrangler is traversing the cliffs above a vast flat desert, a tundra of vibrant orange outstretching as far as the eye can see. I can just make out the road, cutting a meandering path through the sand far below us. At the center of this otherwise featureless expanse, a collection of monolithic structures, towering columns of glass and metal, rising from the ground, connected by a web of long perpendicular streets. There's a city. There's a city on the road. Rob keeps his eye forward. Despite the epic majesty of the cityscape below us, I can tell that his mind is elsewhere, that he's still digesting the contents of our interview. In the end, I think it best to leave him alone with his thoughts. We stay on the mountain for another 20 minutes, before finally winding down to the desert floor. The space ahead of us is two-tone, the sharp saffron of the desert, and the deep blue sky separated by a thin, even horizon. The only objects that cross this perfect boundary are the hulking gray towers of the city, rising from the sand and bursting through into the heavens. We snake along the desert road, the city looming even larger as we make our tentative approach toward the border. There's an eerie contrast to the threshold as we cross it. The copious below the sand switches to gray. The scorching heat instantly cools, and perhaps most notably, what little sound there was is negated entirely. As we delve down an empty, perfectly maintained throughway, I realize that I can't hear anything at all except for the Wrangler's steady rumblings. It's quiet. That's fine by me. Who do you think built this place? I don't know, but whatever brought us here, could be that no one built it, but maybe it just is. I wonder if he's right. It's hard to think such a place could exist for any practical purpose. The city looks off somehow, as if it was built from conjecture, by an architect who had only heard of cities through poorly translated rumors. All the broad features are present, skyscrapers, lampposts, window cleaning platforms, but nothing deeper. It's an empty shell, an ornament in the middle of the desert. As we turn down the next few roads, I stare up at the monolithic structures, each one standing at least 100 stories tall. My eyes trek back down the countless strata of dark windows as I contemplate what it might be to live in such a place. When I reach the ground floor, I am presented with my answer. There's a young man standing at the ground floor window, his hand resting against the glass. He's wearing a dark gray suit and a look of almost mesmeric shock. His mouth open, his hands shaking, his unblinking eyes staring past us as the Wrangler rolls by. My eyes quickly track back up the skyscraper's glass facade, scrutinizing each row of windows in turn. I had naively hoped the buildings would be empty, that this place would be nothing more than a colossal ghost town. Now that I know otherwise, each pane of glass feels like a dark pool of water, still on the surface but with sinister potential lurking within its depths. A few seconds later, more of them arrive. There aren't many at first. Just a few scattered figures stepped up to their windows, pressing themselves against the glass. However, like a light sprinkling of rain that erupts into the downpour, the frequency of their arrival quickly doubles, then triples, until not a single space lies unoccupied. The Wrangler shrinks, subject to the scrutiny of countless individuals on every floor, in every window, all of them clad in the same monochromatic formal wear, and staring down at us like the emissaries of a grand tribunal. As the Wrangler passes by, they continue to stare straight ahead, though it's clear they're aware of our presence. Rob, I see him. Rob puts his foot down, showing the weight of 1,000 pairs of eyes as he leaves the building behind. As the final column of roads slip by us, I glance back, hoping to see them return to the depths of the building. Instead, in those last few moments, I witnessed their collective demeanor fracture into a desperate frenzy, their mouths open in a silent scream as they slam their fists against the glass. Turning back around, I stare into the buildings that currently flank our vehicle. The figures have already arrived at the windows, and their calm is already fading. Rob, we need to go faster. I'm on it. The Wrangler growls with renewed ferocity as Rob plants his foot onto the gas. We lurch toward the next corner, accelerating down the road as Rob scans for these hidden turns. I achingly shift in my feet, keeping an eye on the scene developing in our wake. Shards of broken windows begin to rain onto the asphalt, watching the shattered pieces tumble through the air. It's apparent that the quiet in the city isn't simply due to lack of activity. The torrent of splintered glass is completely silent, even as it crashes against the impervious ground. Nothing in this city makes a noise, nothing except us. The thunderous engine of the Wrangler has never sounded so loud. Looking up, I witness hundreds of hands gripping the shattered window frames, unable to turn myself away as thousands of polished black shoes step over the threshold. The figures stream out from every floor, forming an incomprehensible deluge of humanity. The first wave strikes the ground with more and more landing against them, a heap of tangled figures struggling to separate themselves. Much like the residents of Jubilation and everyone else we've encountered on the road, they appear impervious to the fatal harm such an act should impart. Those that land on their feet hardly even stop, turning towards us and sprinting after the Wrangler. It doesn't take long for the rest of the writhing mass to resolve itself, its constituent individuals joining this frantic stampede, their chaotic charge and desperate screams bereft of any perceivable sound. Even in the midst of the frenzied pursuit, as a foreboding shower of glass falls from every building we pass, the world outside remains silent. The chaos made even more incomprehensible framed against the ungodly stillness in which it takes place. Rob screeches around the corner, drifting onto a long and open street. The roadway ahead is flanked by skyscrapers disappearing into a narrow vanishing point. As we race down this next stretch of road towards a large intersection, the ever-growing mob bursts onto the street behind us, taking the corner with supreme coordination and continuing tirelessly in our direction. A split second later, I'm struck by an abrupt and pervasive idea. It feels unlike any thought I've had before, less of a notion, and more like a prescient hybrid of intuition and déjà vu. As if the course of action at stake is obvious to me, despite my not knowing why. I force my voice above a grating whisper. Rob, we need to drop something behind us, something loud. What are you thinking? Yeah, you just have to trust me, okay? We still have most of the plastic explosive. Could you? Nah, if you took out the blasting cap, I ain't got time to make a new one. Rob glances into the view ahead, then back to the road. I can almost hear the gears turning in his head. But that was the only explosive on board. Think you can drive? I guess we can find out. The car thunders across the tarmac as I clumsily grasp the wheel, shifting myself and working my foot onto the accelerator. Rob lifts himself away and climbs past me into the back of the Wrangler. In my weak stake, every shuddering motion makes my bones rattle. With every subsequent gear shift, I'm forced to take my remaining hand off the wheel and reach across to the stick. The effort is precarious and awkward, making limbs puppeteered by willpower and adrenaline. Every passing second a battle to maintain control. The windows up ahead are starting to fracture. The noise that the Wrangler is carrying in the entire city is starting to preempt our arrival. Behind me, I can hear the rippling of duct tape, the tearing of fabric, and the clattering of falling luggage. I'm not sure what's taking place behind me. I just have to trust that Rob has a plan. I hear the back door swing open, just before we reach the intersection, a metallic scraping behind the Wrangler's floor. A pained grunt from Rob as he throws something onto the road behind us. Behind the crossroads, I slid my hand across along the wheel and twist it sharply on the right. As the car lurches round and onto the next road, I feel my heart sink dramatically. We've been overtaken. The windows ahead of us are shattered. The front doors lay broken on the street, and the building's desperate inhabitants are rushing towards us, blocking off our only means of escape. I slam my foot onto the brake, and the Wrangler shudders to a halt, the engine stalling and cutting out. The streets are now spilling over, an overwhelming swarm converging on our position from 4 directions. I look back to Rob, meets my eyes, his eyes brimming with dismayed finality. An explosion shudders through the air behind us. I look out the back window to see a shattered jerry can, one of Rob's now superfluous fuel reserves. Its dark green shell violently compromised. Its contents spilled out across the road and cast a light. Now that the engine isn't running, the echo of the blast and roar of the primal bellic flame fills the afternoon air. The trajectory of the mad crowd changes instantaneously. The silent Wrangler has fallen from their collective attention as they refocus onto the smoldering flames. Those up ahead continue to rush past us, streaming at the Wrangler as they scramble to the spilled pool of gasoline, digging their hands into the blaze, graspingly, hopelessly at the fire. Delicately, careful to not make a single shred of noise, I climb out of the driver's seat, joining Rob in the back of the Wrangler. He addresses me in a confused whisper. "Why don't they care about us? What are they doing?" "It's the sound. They want it for themselves." I don't know how I'm so sure, but I know that's the case. The jerry creak and screams as the city dwellers tear into smaller and smaller pieces, frantically examining every jagged scrap. With every passing second, the fire dies down. The crowd grows increasingly distressed, as if a precious commodity is slipping through their fingers. They don't understand it. They'll pull it apart trying to figure out, and they'll never get any closer. Then it'll be quiet again. Where are you getting this from? I don't know, just a feeling. Well, pretty sure that would have pulled us apart too. I'd say we're pretty lucky. Yeah, pretty lucky. As the last of the gasoline is eaten up and the fire dies away, the city dwellers remain in the streets devoid of their momentary sense of purpose, their prize vanishing into ether. The crowd's desperation is into a hushed despondency. I watch them as they pass by, countless faces racked with sorrow, their aimless shuffling form a lonesome sea, a grayscale ocean that spans the desolate city. The Wrangler is now adrift in the center of that ocean. It's clear that any attempting to start the engine would bring the entire city down on us, reigniting their futile hope, causing them to tear through the car and anything inside it. For the foreseeable future, we're completely stranded. Don't worry about it, okay? I don't think they're going to leave, Rob. Okay, and what then? They'll still be everywhere. They're a smart pair. We'll think of something. In the eerie, pervasive calm that surrounds us, I sit myself down next to Rob and lean back against the wall. Nothing else to do but wait for a situation to change after watching the figures outside for over an hour. The only thing that's different is a strange needling sensation that feels like it's emanating from my now absent forearm. My arm hurts. How's that possible? Don't worry, it's called phantom limb. You got some sensation, right? Like still something there? A lot of people get that after amputations here. Rob reaches into his medical kit and retracts a blue jar of tablets. Twisting off the cap, he shakes 2 pills free. You're gonna need these for the pain. I stare at the tablets for a moment before collecting them in open palm. He passes me his canteen, and I swallow them down in 2 weak gulps. You have a lot of experience with amputations. More than you'd think. My brow is furrowed. Though I admit my remark as a passing jibe, Rob's response rings with a strange sincerity. It takes me a moment to realize why that is. I forgot. You were drafted. You never talked about it. Been thinking about that a lot. Bunch of strangers brought together under false pretenses. Told that we're serving a grand new purpose by some old liar. Guess it's interesting how time repeats itself. Now that I think about it, he drove a Jeep too. Rob, I told you you didn't bring us here. That don't change nothing. Don't change what I did. To you, to Bobby, to any of them. Maybe you were there in the forest, but I was the one who started this. The one who kept asking what was at the end of the road. What do you think it is at the end, Rob? Starting to think that ain't for me to know. I've been moving from place to place so long, seen everyone else settles down. For as I can see, the end of the road is just wherever you decide to stop. I rest my head on Rob's shoulder. He gently places his arm around me. It isn't long before medication starts to take effect. Quietly overtaking my already weakened constitution, the pain subsides, dulled along with the rest of my senses. The sun is still streaming windshield as my eyes begin to drift shut. I watch the figures pass the windows, my eyelids getting weaker. I don't want this to be the end, Rob. I know, Miss Sharma, I know. The last thing I see before I fall into a dreamless artificial sleep, as Rob Guthard's hand reaching for the rifle. My eyes were selves open. The sun is beginning to set. I've been moved. As my vision adjusts, it's become clear that I'm still in the Wrangler, my head resting against a pile of fresh clothes, a soft travel blanket laid across me. I glance around to find that Rob's nowhere to be seen. Momentarily forgetting the situation outside the car, I attempt to call out for him. The syllable catches in my throat as a shambling figure passes by the window, wringing its hands in despair and casting a long shadow through the car. With a renewed sense of caution, I slide the blanket to one side, slowly make my way to the front. The cabin is similarly empty, except for a single scrap of paper, torn from my notebook. It lies on the driver's seat, a small object hidden within the fold. When I open it, I find my headphone and 5 neatly coded words. Channel 1 to all cars. My hand starts to shake as I rest the note on the dashboard. Slowly climbing through it and placing myself gently into the driver's seat. My heart in my radio. I insert the headphones into the jack of the CB radio. Take a single quivering breath in and press the first button. Rob? I'm sorry, Miss Sharma. Rob, where are you? Down the road a little. Got myself to one of the rooftops. I know I always hated cities, but once you're above it, the view is really something. Come back, Rob, please. Come back, please. I wish I could. But we both know those things ain't living, and you need the car to get wherever you gotta go. Best I can do is make some ruckus, draw 'em out of your way. I rest my head against the steering wheel, bracing myself against the weight of his words. I can't do this without you. I don't think that's true, Miss Sharma. I think whatever's on this road, it wants you to make it all the way. All I was meant to do was to bring you this far. Now, you don't have to listen to it. You can turn around and drive home. But either way, only one of us is driving out of here. So I guess the only question left is, which way do you want to go? Well, are you ahead of me or behind me? I can be anywhere. It's your choice, Miss Sharma. In the wake of Rob's words, shadow of decision, and cast into silence. Not because the choice is hard, but because I'm ashamed that it's so easy. It was made the moment I first stepped into the Wrangler, and renewed in every perplexing moment since. The need to know, to comprehend, to uncover. The truth has been with me all my life, but I never knew its roots ran so deep. That it would endure so ardently when everyone else has been stripped away. I stare into the rear view mirror, seeing myself for the first time, and I have to admit I'm scared. Stay where you are, Rob. Okay, Miss Sharma, you ready? Yeah, I'm ready. All right, then. Suppose it's about time this thing did some good. The shot explodes through the city. Hearing a faint and booming echo reaches me on the quiet city air. Its effect on the city's dwellers is immediate. Their collective melancholy shatters in an instant, replaced by a renewed fixation. Before I know it, the disparate crowd unites once more into a stampeding horde, rushing past the windows of the Wrangler and back down the road toward the source of the noise. They on their way? As the last of the city dwellers disappear behind me, I run my hand across the steering wheel and down to the ignition. Yeah, they're on their way. Okay then, what are you waiting for? With a fateful twist of the key, the Wrangler roars back to life. The wheel kicks against the asphalt, transporting me through the streets of this city. As I barrel away from the intersection, I see a small contingent of pursuers rushing around the corner behind me. Rob fires the rifle again, maintaining the attention of the majority. The stragglers fall away in my rear-view mirror, losing ground against the Wrangler. I take the first left, then the next possible right, then another left. A few minutes later, I eventually find myself on the last stretch of road, leading me back into the vast and empty desert. So you gonna make it? Yeah, I'm gonna make it. Good, that's good, Miss Sharma. If you find Marjorie, if you get a chance to let me know, well, it's more than I deserve, but of course I will. I appreciate that. Okay, they're gonna be here soon, so I'm gonna go radio silent for a while. If I call, you'll know I made it out. If I don't call, just assume I made it out, okay? Please tell me you're going to be all right, Rob. It's been a real honor driving with you, Miss Sharma. The sound of a final shot reverberates through the radio. It's echoed, drowned out by the roaring engine of the Wrangler. The world shifts around me as I burst out of the city and back onto the desert road. The way ahead is laden with immense possibility, yet as I disappear into the vastness of the desert, I can only think of what I've left behind. Rob J. Guthert had his flaws, marked by loss, driven by obsession, his good intentions often paving the way to tragedy and heartbreak. As the tears begin to roll down my cheek, I decide to remember him differently, as a valued friend, a good man, and above all else, a great story, no matter how you tell it. That is the end of part 9. Which means we are on the final part 10. So buckle in, folks. Part 10. Well then, here we are. I have to be honest, when I posted the first of these logs from my bedroom in North London, I didn't think it would go very far. After all, why would it? I wasn't a regular contributor to this site, nor a seasoned veteran of the paranormal. I was just a man who missed his friend, seeking a few words of wisdom from an online message board, open to the idea that it wouldn't lead anywhere. Suffice to say, I couldn't have been more wrong. Over the past 2 months, The incredible advice I've received from this forum and the amazing leads you've sent my way, having opened up entire worlds of possibility. It's thanks to all of you that I'm where I am now, sitting in a rental car on a quiet street in Phoenix, Arizona, posting the last of Alice's records. I realize I've written more than usual for my part. Apologies for this. If you want to skip straight to Alice's section, that's fine. Otherwise, please consider this the prologue to the epilogue. It's very, very early in the morning over here, with only the gravest of the graveyard shifts out on the streets. By all rights, I should be in bed, and not wasting petrol on an aimless drive through the city. The ritual helps me think, however, and I'd recently been given a lot to think about, courtesy of a young woman at a local bar. She was a forum member who'd contacted me over direct message. When we met up earlier in the night, it was clear she'd done a great deal of research, charting every mirror shop in Phoenix in an attempt to reconstruct the route Alice took on February 7th, 2017. We spoke for quite a while about the game, about Alice, and about life in general. Once closing time rolled around, she handed me a printout of the most likely route, with all the key locations circled. Then, in the final minutes before we parted ways, she nervously asked me 2 questions. The first put me in a rather sour mood. The second provided the fuel for my 3 a.m. drive. Question 1. Are you sure she wants you to find her? I've been hearing the same query from a few of you recently, especially since Part 9 was posted. People commenting that Alice made a clear choice when she left Rob behind in the Silent City, that I was searching for someone who wasn't seeking return. I'd like to take a moment to respond to this, as I responded to it earlier tonight. To be clear, the Alice I know wouldn't do that. She was planning to come back. She told us as much. I'm not going to waste your time with my theories. We've seen what the road can do to people's minds, how it can carry them away against their better judgment. Understand what's being asked. I understand why it's being asked, but if those sorts of questions are all you have to offer, I'd kindly ask you to find another way to help. Question 2 was less clear-cut. What are you going to do now? It's something you guys have also been asking me, but that was the first time I'd heard the question out loud. The awkward silence that followed, it became obvious to her, in some ways to me, that I didn't have an answer. I decided to take a drive while I figured it out. I've been in my car the rest of the night. After an hour of aimless meandering, I realized I was close to one of the marked locations, the alleyway, where Alice first entered the underpass, the point at which she first disappeared into the road, turning into the side street, just after a large intersection. I was briefly relieved to see no sign of the tunnel. The part of me that still hoped this game was a fiction swelled at the sudden lack of evidence. My reaction was short-lived, of course, as I quickly realized that the tunnel wouldn't have shown itself to me anyway. Even if the game were real, I'd hardly been sticking to the rules on my way here. There was no denying that the place resembled Alice's descriptions, however. A long time to go until I'd remotely tired. I decided to work my way back along the route, retracing Alice's steps toward Rob Guthard Street. Okay, so I have to admit at this point, I suffered from a momentary lapse in intelligence. In a fog of distraction, residual jet lag, and general dullardry, I drove for longer than I cared to admit under the misconception that I wasn't playing the game. I thought this was because I was heading in the opposite direction, and started my run with a right-hand turn, when the rules explicitly state that you begin by turning left. Of course, I'm sure all of you would have realized immediately that it didn't mean I was out of the game. It just meant that I started with my first left turn, one road later. Alice was always the smart one. What I'm trying to say is that, due to this fairly mindless oversight, I wasn't exactly looking out for the woman in gray as I drove past what should have been her corner. There wasn't a mirror shop this time, of course. That's only the 34th turn when you're coming the other way. In fact, I'm not sure which of the many passing streets it was. It is strange, though, as I turn back through my journey, I feel like I would have noticed her. The streets were practically deserted, so much so that any pedestrian stood out immediately. I know I should have more closely, but if you ask my honest opinion, I don't think she was there at all. The moment I realized this, I felt it again, the faint, perverse hope that I had been misled. The entire story was nothing more than a twisted, elaborate fabrication. It wasn't long until I passed an old mirror shop. and 34 turns later, arrived on what must have been Alice's starting street. It was an inner-city neighborhood whose residents were all fast asleep. The moment I realized that the game was in play, I'd been thinking less and less about this particular road, and more about the one directly after it, resting just beyond the crossroads. I'd come halfway across the world on the strength of Alice's account, but I'd seen no first-hand proof of the left-right game. If the whole thing was a hoax, then the next road should be just another street. If it was real, then I'd know soon enough. I crawled up to the junction with my heart in my throat. With every inch of road that passed my tires, I found myself hoping more and more that it wouldn't be true. Let someone be playing a prank on me. Let the logs be counterfeit. Let Alice be anywhere else but on that road. I took the corner in a wide arc, parking myself in center of the crossroads, my headlights facing down the next turn. Ahead of me was a quiet residential street, lines of neatly parked cars, rows of well-kept yards, and squarely drawn windows. Yet, at its center, in utter defiance of the modest surroundings, the road sank into a deep and dimly lit corridor, cutting beneath the street and disappearing into complete darkness. I'd always known it was true. In the presence of grim confirmation, the question I was asked earlier that night started to ring in my ears, as if echoing out of the tunnel itself. After an entire night's driving, after 2 full months of searching, I still didn't have a response. In the end, I just left the engine running, as if turning it off would somehow be a sign of retreat, so I had to type up the notes you're reading now. I thought maybe the process of putting it all down on paper would bring me clarity, and leave me with either a note of farewell or a note of apology to Alice for not having what it took to find her. And now here I am, still undecided, still writing, still sitting in this rental car on a quiet street in Phoenix, Arizona. Though perhaps the street's not as quiet as I thought. I just looked back to the previous road, down the street where Alice began her journey. As I type this very paragraph, I can see a figure standing on the sidewalk, just outside one of the houses. It isn't the woman in gray this time, though it's almost too dark to make out. I can tell the figure is an older male, well-built and imposing, the rugged features of his withered face half lit by moonlight. I had never seen this man before, yet he bears a striking resemblance to another man, a man whose descriptions have been well recorded within the pages of Alice's logs. He watches me in silence, staring through the window of my still-running car. I wonder if he can help. The Left-Right Game, Draft 1, the 20th of February, 2017. The Left-Right Game was once nothing more than a 9-page document, peeking out of a yellow envelope resting quietly on my desk. I remember reading it on my lunch break. I remember it made me laugh. The submission had arrived with my first post, quietly making its way around the office, treated by everyone as a short-lived novelty of little journalistic value. The story was easy to dismiss, appearing all too similar to the rambling ghost stories and blurry UFO sightings that filled our mailbox on a daily basis, and which most of the senior staff had learned to instinctively ignore. Doomed by association, the document was quickly passed over. My desk merely pit stop on its way to the rejection pile. I was curious, however, and after an uneventful few months in my new role, I had no compunctions about fishing from the scrap heap. Placing the envelope in my satchel alongside a misfit crowd of similar rejects, I slipped away to a local coffee shop, reading it in an armchair by the window. Somewhere around page 3, between the description of the game's rules and the exhaustive list of required skills, my mouth started to curl into an irrepressible smile. They'd been gloriously wrong about this one. It wasn't some paranoid diatribe, nor a sensationalist plea for attention. Within these pages lay an integral glimpse of a man's passionate obsession. As I read on, something about his earnest eccentricity, incredible thoroughness, and unquestioning confidence made it impossible to put down. When I turned the final page, reading the last of Rob Guthard's charming and refreshingly well-formatted submission, I knew that this was the story I wanted to tell. Later that day, I found myself in the editor's office making a case for it. They didn't quite see what I saw, but I was intent to win them over regardless. I told them that the story could would be very character would be very characterful, colorful, thought-provoking. At the very least, I thought I wouldn't be gone long. It's been 12 days since then. 10 since I first entered the Wrangler in Phoenix, Arizona. 5 since I commandeered it myself, leaving Rob behind in the Silent City. I haven't updated much recently, save for a regular set of notes made for my own benefit. In all honesty, after I finished writing up my account of the city, I was struck by an overpowering sense of needlessness. There was no one left to receive these logs, no friends to proofread, no editor to hand them to. It seemed pointless to maintain the same prosaic format as before. I still largely agree with this assessment. It's only due to a set of exceptional circumstances that I've chosen to type up the following account in full. Whoever this reaches, I want to thank you for reading up to now. I'm quite sure this will be my final installment. The moon has broken, and in my entire life I've never witnessed an evening so still. The air is cool and quiet, and the Wrangler cuts cleanly through it as I glide down a stretch of even tarmac. The scene is defined by calm and absence. Not a cloud in the sky, not a solitary whisper of breeze, not a single blade of grass stirring on the dark green banks beside me. Yet, even on a night as peaceful as this, I can't help but feel far away from home. The city has served as a turning point in that regard. Before we reach those titanic monoliths, the landscapes we passed through generally resemble the world I once knew. A few obvious exceptions aside, there was nothing about the environments that looked truly divorced from reality. That's all changed now. The aberrant aspects of this new world are unignorable, constantly hanging at the corner of my eye, passively injecting a sense of wonder and disconcernment into the otherwise silent night. A few days ago, the moon started to crack like old porcelain. I hardly noticed at first, my eyes fixed on the road as it loomed above me, quietly splittering into 3 jagged pieces. As of tonight, the empty space between each fragment has significantly decreased. If I focus on the sky for a little while, I can almost see them falling away from each other, charting infinite and lonesome trajectories through a barren cosmos, against a backdrop of foreign constellations. The stars themselves fall further than they should. The night sky travels down past the horizon and continues below it, wrapping underneath the grassy bank. It's as if the road and the narrow plains on either side are suspended in the middle of a vast abyss, a platform in the middle of open space. At least, that's what I thought it was at first. It didn't take long before I noticed the broken moon was appearing twice in the sky, both above and below me. A pair of orbiting satellites, identical and in perfect alignment. That's when I realized that there were no stars below me. I was merely staring across a flat surface so flawlessly mirror-like as to cast a perfect reflection of the heavens above. I was driving through the center of a lake. The water is impossibly still, since leaving the shoreline proper yesterday night. I've seen neither a wave nor a ripple across its placid surface. It's also undeniably vast, reaching beyond the horizon in every direction and continuing further still. Without being sure how I know, aware that the water carries on for an unspeakable distance, that I would sooner reach the stars themselves before setting foot on the opposite shore. I lean over and switch gears. The act of driving the Wrangler was a daunting one at first, but after the first 2 days I've managed to make do. An old scarf wrapped tightly around the steering wheel serves as a makeshift handle, allowing me to navigate corners one-handed. I don't have an elegant solution for the gear shift, but I've quickly grown used to the process. If I've learned anything from the road, it's that grace is the first casualty in the fight for survival. Adaptability, no matter how clumsy, outlasts it at every turn. A few minutes later, the Wrangler pulls up on a spacious verge, a large circle of land surrounded entirely by dark waters. At the far end, the grass seems to fall away, drooping sharply into the lake with a dead stop. The road continues, of course, but it's the only thing that does. With nothing on either side, it forms a narrow bridge of perfectly flat asphalt, raised on a bed of mud and rock. I press my boot onto the brake pedal, easing the Wrangler to a steady halt at the center of the clearing. For the first time today, I open the car and climb out of my seat. The dull tap of asphalt shifts to a softening rustle as I make my way over to the lakeside. There's something on the shore, a barely discernible object, almost entirely concealed by a shock of verdant undergrowth. It's a miracle I'd managed to spy it from the road, though. Perhaps something about the stark uniformity of the landscape had made it stand out. As I advance toward the water, and the object draw near, its indeterminate form solidifies in my mind. It's a human arm, reaching out from the water and onto the bank. I crouch down to examine the few pertinent details. The fingers are still embedded firmly into the soil. The thumbnail is broken, colored by a peeling coat of faded varnish. There's a pallid, emaciated quality to the skin, spreading down the arm until it disappears beneath a thick, swollen sleeve. At the point it meets the surface, the water soaks into the fabric, turning it black from the original gray. With a sad exhalation, I rise to my feet and lean over the water's edge. The body of Marjorie Guthard lies against the silt, her cheek resting on the lake bed, her wide, bewildered eyes staring out into the open lake. She's been almost perfectly preserved, save for the tautness of her skin and its mottled gray pallor. She looked exactly like the woman I saw in the 35th turn, who tried to repel me from the road, who spoke of a lake drinking her wounds clean. It seems her ramblings weren't completely void of fact. It's clear to see that Marjorie had been exsanguinated so completely, in fact, that the only evidence that blood ever flowed through her veins is the large dark stain across her shredded blouse. It doesn't take long before the perpetrator makes itself known. As I stare into the water, a steady stream of formless whispers sink up through the depths of the lake. The soft, spokely murmurs drip to my ears, taking root in the back of my mind and instantly blooming into a flurry of deeply persuasive promises. I find myself entirely transfixed by the still water, as a myriad of generous offerings unfold throughout my consciousness. The whispers suggest an end to the phantom pains in my absent arm, perhaps even a completely restored limb, stronger than it had been before. Furthermore, it shows me a glimpse of incomprehensible span, its furthest bank reaching across countless worlds, its deepest point lying below everything. I'm offered total knowledge of every league, every fathom, every inconceivable shore. My hand reaches down as the whispers continue, every bargain steeped in sweet beneficence. A moment later, my short fingers brush against the soft grass and wrap around Marjorie's exposed arm. Digging my heels into the ground, I lean myself backwards and pull. The water ripples and splashes as I drag Marjorie's lifeless body slowly onto the bank. I feel the voices in my mind grow louder, erupting in anger as I back away from the lake. The promises have been convincing, each quiet solicitation undeniably persuasive, but after seeing Marjorie's wretched fate and the look of eternal betrayal in her vacant eyes, I found myself aware of a subtle undercurrent behind every syllable, a sense of desperation and timeless hunger emanating from beneath the lake's surface. I already have a clear understanding of what would have happened if I'd lost myself to those waters. I suspect it's no coincidence that of the countless shores it showed me, all of them appeared to be deserted. Marjorie wouldn't have stood a chance. She'd left the forest alone, grievously wounded and without a vehicle. She'd walked the whole way here, bleeding endlessly, the road's rejuvenating power battling every moment against her body's natural inclination to die. I suspect the road's influence wasn't strong enough, and when a whispering voice promised ever so sweetly to mend her, she would have been in no position to refuse. That child entity that they met in the forest, that was Marjorie's, because she disappeared when she was pregnant. So, damn. Her other sleep brushes against dry land, her body leaving the water for the first time in decades. I keep pulling until my boots hit asphalt, laying her down on the grass just beside the Wrangler. After a moment of sober vigil, I walk to the back of the car and fetch Rob's foldable spade. A few A long few hours follow. I've never dug someone's grave before, and my injury is hardly conducive to the task. My fleece tied around my waist, pearls of sweat running down my brow. I manage to slowly chip away at the damp earth. 5 hours later, my back cramping, my hand raw from gripping the shovel, I attempt to lower Marjorie into the rough pit with some semblance of grace, her limbs dropping limply into the soft soil despite my best efforts. It takes over an hour to shovel the soil back. It's a sobering and ugly task. As a layer of dirt covers her face, I realize this will be the last time a living person lays their eyes on Marjorie Guthard. Burying her suddenly feels disrespectful, as if it's an act I don't have the right to perform. Once it's done, I drop onto my knees, a dull ache in my muscles as I smooth out the disturbed ground with the back of the shovel. You. Even before I turn to face her, I can hear a scowl in her voice. There's an odious depth to that one acrid syllable, a potent witch's brew of contempt and accusation that feels like it's been festering in her drowned lungs for decades. Reluctantly, I rise to my feet and turn around, finding myself face to face with the woman I just buried. She looks different now. Her clothes are dry, her skin clear, with nothing to be seen of the deep dark gash in her blouse. Marjorie. Unlike the empty vessel below us, the woman in front of me is by no means at peace. She shakes and retches with the same indignant fury I witnessed when we first met. When she speaks, her words shudder under the weight of her own turbulent emotions. I chased you. I ran to you. I gave him up for you. I'm sorry, Marjorie. I don't know what you mean. Tell me what you mean. The things I saw. Things so beautiful. And I saw her walking alone through the new worlds. I gave everything up for you. I don't know quite what to say. It's pointless to ask her what she means, to try and understand her frenetic ramblings. In the end, I can only try to speak her language. Marjorie, I didn't mean you to... Marjorie's trembling breath burst into a despairing fit of laughter. Yes, you did. Yes, you did. And now you're here. Marjorie's wild and volatile demeanor shifts once more, her laughter degrading further into desperate crying panic. And what do I do now? What do I do? Marjorie cringes with the terror of the self-imposed question, placing her head in her hands and repeating it over and over again. As I watch her wrestle with despair, I'm struck by an idea I'd never before considered. The disconcerting notion that, in death, we are not transported to a set destination by some ethereal attendant, that in fact nothing is decided for us. Perhaps the manner in which we spend our afterlife is down to us, a decision we have to make ourselves. Marjorie is standing over her own lifeless body, still lost, still entirely unmoored. There's no sign of boundless paradise, inescapable damnation, or everlasting nothingness. The common thread they share, a final release from the weight of our own agency, is similarly absent. Perhaps we can never get that freedom. Perhaps we continue like we always do, accompanied by all our imperfections, uncertainty, and discontent. Perhaps we must choose our eternity. After all my time on the road, that's possibly the most terrifying notion I've encountered. You never stop looking, you know. Marjorie snaps out of her wretched despair, instantly aware of who I'm referring to, staring up at me with an expression I've never seen her wear before. I saw him, walking on the road. He didn't stop. He was never going to stop. I think he was looking for you, Marjorie. He still is. Marjorie stares through me. For the first time since we met on that quiet Phoenician corner, I can see the faint spark of something other than misery and rage across her tear-stained face. I hold her gaze for a moment more, before pulling my phone from my pocket. In a single sweep of my contacts, I delete every number except for one, a number I pulled from the Nokia during our second night on the road, a number that connects to a lost wanderer of the road. I don't know if this can help, but stranger things have happened. She stares up into my eyes. I feel like we're finally meeting for the first time without a word. Marjorie reaches out a quivering hand and takes the phone from my outstretched fingers. Before I can say anything more, Marjorie Guthard is gone. A few moments later, A refreshing breeze lands against my cheek, a soft zephyr cooling my still warm face. It's a welcome sensation, the first movement I've witnessed in the air since I set out onto the lake. Wiping the sweat from my forehead, I stare quietly along the bridge, the breeze picking up around me. It's a subtle wind at first, brushing stray hairs across my forehead, chilling the perspiration on my neck. Yet as I reach my hand out, feel the air slip my fingers, I'm witness to a steady rise in both strength and magnitude. The sound of the wind grows from a whisper to a howl. Seconds later, the hair sleeves of my fleece begin to stream sideways. My hair lifts from my back, billowing in the throes of a developing gale. I back up against the Wrangler's hood as the air finally erupts into a roaring, cacophonous cyclone. My hand reflexively seeks the sturdy frame of the Wrangler. My fingers wrap around the grill, my arms tensing as the unrelenting wind threatens to drag me from the road. Squinting through the violent tempest, I focus on a single point in space, just above the threshold of the bridge. In the midst of the storm, a jagged line of white-hot light bursts out of the ether, tearing through the night's fabric. A crackling fissure that widens and yawns, forcing apart the curtains of reality as they frenetically struggle to recombine. Staring through the shimmering fracture, I'm subjected to the briefest glimpse of a boundless and impossible vista. As a faraway place in both distance and time, an achingly beautiful and gloriously terrifying dreamscape, enduring on the majestic shores of infinity. Every moment there spans a millennium and unfolds in countless directions at once. Every passing shadow holds a darkness beyond measure, their edges burned by the glare of a waking sun which looks across every conceivable world within a hollow, rancorous intent. In the midst of this maddening landscape, a singular entity approaches, gliding towards the portal, with the clear intent to pass through. As it breaches the shuddering gateway, and the wind dies down around it, I stare up at its grand celestial form. The being is unlike anything I've ever seen, composed entirely from electric arcs of brilliant magnesic light, which bursts from a volatile and blinding central core. It sounds like a lightning storm, its plasmatic tendrils snapping and crackling, bursting chaotically through the night air before collapsing in on themselves. As they fall back into the creature's center, they emit pale clouds of vaporous fractals that fade softly into the air. Somehow, even as my eyes barely adjust to the stark light, I realize that the entity usually burns much brighter. It's dampened its glow for my benefit, so it can appear before me without scorching my eyes from their sockets. It's you, isn't it? You're the voice I've been hearing. You're the one who brought me here. The bristling maelstrom of light hangs in the air, crackling and shifting, its transient limbs throbbing with chaotic incandescence. Part of me wants to hide, part of me wants to run, but neither are an option anymore. Releasing my hand from the Wrangler's grill, I take a single step forward, standing on my own and staring up to the entity's smoldering core. Can I get an interview? The creature doesn't react. In the following silence, I feel it observing me. When it finally responds, its voice ruptures the night, echoing through my skull. There is little time, but you may ask what questions you have. Each reverberating syllable forms a string of little shockwaves in the surrounding lake, emitting outwards from being in a perfect circle. I watch the waves roll into the distance, showing no sign of ever diminishing, and I think about what questions to ask first. In the end, it comes to me quickly. A promise is a promise, after all. What happened to Marjorie? Why did she do what she did? The being pauses as if considering its response. When it does reply, it speaks with a calm sobriety. She glimpsed an echo of the future, dreamed of the road, the things that it passes through. Like whatever's through here. I gestured toward the gateway, which is now almost entirely blocked from view by the creature's spiraling form. She dreamed of untold frontiers. She saw a lone woman walking them. Over time, the fulfillment of that vision became everything to her. But it wasn't her. She thought she was seeing her own future, but it was you. Those 3 words, as they burst into the open air, casting 3 narrow waves across the boundless water, hit me with a deep and a heavy force. Unbeknownst to myself, decades before I was even born, Marjorie had been driven insane by dreams of maddening grandeur, of a life of boundless possibility and true significance. She had given everything up to chase a shadow that eventually turned out to be mine. I had just pulled Rob into this game. I was the reason for everything. I was the cause for the tragedy that befell his entire family. She didn't just dream those sights, you influenced her. You let her see them, the same way you made Rob see me in Aokigahara. You pushed and you prodded wherever you needed so that I ended up here. Are you the reason Bobby got the rules in the first place? Yes. But why? You toyed with so many lives across decades. But why me? Why does it matter that I travel the road? Because, across all humanity, across every conceivable permutation, you are the one who makes it the furthest. It speaks plainly, as if the statement were a foregone conclusion, yet its words strike me into silence. The creature continues, I've watched you work your way here, through skill and through tenacity, and undeniably through luck. You were brought here because of these qualities, and they will carry you further along the road than any other. Then, why didn't you and just bring me here? All that influence and you didn't lift a finger. Everything that happened, events transpired as they needed to. As they needed to. People died. Marjorie, Bobby, Ace, Apollo, Eve, Earth, everyone, they're all gone. Do you not care at all? In response to my words, the entity remains silent for longer than usual. I care more than you know. There are things greater than your understanding, forces that exist beyond the realms of your comprehension, that you would consider a threat to everything you hold dear. My actions were guided by a higher standard of knowledge. Your protests are predicated to a false understanding. You're saying I don't understand death. You don't. That still doesn't make it right. Regardless, my influence is necessary. That which is necessary must be. What even are you? I cannot answer that question in any way you'd understand. That's not good enough. The creature doesn't respond, as if it doesn't feel it needs to. So far it's returned my every argument with impenetrable certainty. From the domain it occupies, knowing what it knows, my arguments must seem entirely facile. Even if it did feel the need to justify itself, after seeing the place it hails from, I wonder if there's any way I could comprehend its motives. Still, that doesn't mean my arguments are invalid, and the creature's lofty dispassion does little more than stoke my desire to oppose it. And what if I don't want any part of this? You are traveling the aberrant strand, a singularly stable flaw in the fabric of reality. As it carries you farther from the world you know, you'll be freed from the influence of the old laws. You have already noticed the effects in those who settled the road, those who were lost to it, and in yourself. Energy without consumption, knowledge without requisite experience. You are shedding entropy and causality, and in time, you will reach realms of understanding that you cannot currently fathom. You will find answers to questions you never thought to ask. You will discover absolute truth. For this reason, you will carry on. That's the only reason? Do you need another? It doesn't come across as a question, but rather another blunt statement of fact. I understand the effect it's speaking of. Ever since the city, I've been encountering vague notions and fragmented ideas that occur to me randomly and without announcement. New avenues of thought lead to revelations that would otherwise lie beyond my mortal reach. I started to comprehend things I could barely have conceived of back home, and through the onset of these notions had been terrifying at first. They grow less so with every passing day. No. I don't trust you, I don't. Your trust is immaterial. You will travel the road regardless. The creature's already stark glow starts to intensify. I've watched you on every turn, across every moment of your journey. One of the creature's countless protrusions lashes out at the empty air, forming another harsh, glowing fissure. It wrenches itself open in a few stilted jolts, a transparent, almost crystalline membrane across the gap. Through it, I can see myself, in the center of a cornfield, examining a block of C4 explosive, as if I'm staring into the past through a jagged shard of one-way glass. I've watched you questioning. Though we can't be seen through the aperture, I see the glass-like membrane shake with the force of the creature's voice. As the wind collapses, I see the rows of corn thrown into a frenzy. A second arc lashes out at the sky, forming a second aperture. This time I'm expecting the sight before me. I see myself crying in the forest, a silent radio by my side. I've watched you struggle. The second window closes. The creature has made its point. I've watched you fight to make your way here. You will not turn around. You make it sound like I don't have a choice. You do have a choice, Alice, but you already made it. I have grown to detest the creature's presumption. In that moment, I know it's right. What it is saying is true. I've done things that I never would have imagined to do in order to get where I am now. In fact, if this being hadn't arrived at all, I'd already be heading out over the bridge. I'm not proud of what drives me, that same ugly impulse that led me to refuse Rob's offer of return, that made it so easy to leave him behind in the silent city. But there's no denying that the impulse is there. It's been with me the whole time, long before I ever arrived in Phoenix, Arizona, and it's buried deeper than I'd ever wanted to admit. Do I get to say goodbye? The entity says nothing. It hangs in the air, flickering and coursing with ruptured bolts of light. The next thing I hear is a faint mechanical hum emanating from the Wrangler behind me. Turning around, I pace briskly back to the car, opening the door and reaching into the passenger seat. My notebook is booting up, seemingly of its own accord. Picking up the laptop, I lift the lid as I march back towards the bridge. I stare up at the silence before me. When I look down to the laptop, my email client is currently displayed on the screen. How long do I have? Long enough. The entity begins to regress, its arcs diminishing at the being as its core turns away. Its message has been delivered. There is nothing more to discuss. As it passes through the gateway, into an unknowable world far removed from my own, I call out after it. I'm still not certain I trust you. The being focuses on me once more. As the fracture begins to close, a final set of waves pass across the surface of the lake as it solemnly replies, I remember. A moment later, the being is gone. I stand motionless in the middle of the road, the entity's final remarks washing over me. Its curious choice of words echoing in my head. In the renewed silence, the faint stirrings of an overwhelming and terrible revelation start to form in my mind. It could have simply said that I knew of my mistrust, that it heard the overtones in my voice, saw the disdain across my face, or otherwise sensed it in the space between us. Instead, the being spoke as if my current feelings were a memory, dwelling somewhere within its depths. It was undeniable that my time on the road was changing me, but in all this time I'd never considered how those changes might evolve as the journey continues. I never thought about what I might gain, what I might lose, or about what I might inevitably become. A short while passes before I lower my eyes from the empty space across above the bridge to the screen of my notebook. Lowering myself down, I cross my leg and rest my back against the Wrangler. If you've been reading from the beginning, you've finally caught up with me. I hope you'll allow me a few personal messages. To Rob, I hope you're able to read this someday, and I am so sorry for everything I've done, for everything I may do. I hope you understand that I didn't know, and that none of this was your fault. You did the best you could, and the days I spent with you were the most significant end of my life. It was an honor to know you, and I hope that you, among those pages, you find the answers and the peace that you deserve. To my mom and dad, I'm sorry I won't be sending this to you. In the end, I was carried along this road by a profound selfishness, and I just can't bring myself to face you. I can't imagine the pain I'll be putting you through, and I won't try to justify my actions. All I can say is that I love you, and I'm sorry that my last act towards you was one of cowardice. And finally to you, the person to whom this message will be addressed. I'm sorry, I always thought I'd see you again. Someday, that the roads I took would eventually lead me home. That doesn't look so likely now. Though I could say a lot to you, I'm not going to. But I wish we could have been friends for longer. It feels like a lifetime since I first arrived at Rob Guthard's quiet street. I remember the uncertainty as I waited for him to open his door, with no conceivable idea that was about to transpire. Like so many other things that's now changed, despite being in an entirely new world, further from home than anyone's ever been, I know exactly what's going to happen next. I'm going to take a drive, take a left, then the next possible road on the right, then the next possible left. I will repeat the process ad infinitum until I wind up somewhere new. And from there I'll keep driving beyond worlds, beyond time, beyond the bounds of my imagining, to a place where the lake runs dry, where the broken moon fades away, and the stars disappear into the rear view, to a place where everything has fallen away, and the road is all there is. Finn. And that is the end of the Left-Right game by Jack Anderson. I hope you all enjoyed that. And this has been... It's been a heck of a story. So good. I can see why so many people like it, for sure. And very, very unique. So, but those listening to this, I hope you enjoyed it. And thank you very much for coming along and taking this journey with us. Or traveling this road with me. Okay, that was dope. I apologize. Anyway, thank you all so much. Thank you.